this guy came up to fight you, and you're like, look, you're too fucking small, or I'll kill you. No reason to crush him in the pit. Let him go. Hit the bigger guys. I love when two big guys go at it. Cracks me up. It's like, oh shit! I see it coming. I see it from one side to the other. I'm like, oh shit! Let's see if this goes down. It's like, like the two goons on ice. Oh, are they gonna have it out tonight or what?
What is up, my friends? Thanks for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. When you think about people in the hardcore scene and you start to think of different regions, and you naturally, if you're well versed in this shit, you'll immediately certain names, different entities, different things come up. And when I think of Philadelphia, obviously This Is Hardcore and Joe Hardcore is one of the first things that comes to mind. And without him, I know that it's fair to say that a lot of people wouldn't just be into the shit, or have at the very least been exposed to this. And definitely as a kid growing up watching a lot of the Hate 56 videos, and Sonny's work ultimately inspired me to start Scoped Exposure. This feels like a very full circle moment for me to be able to interview someone who's just had a hand indirectly in getting me really excited and really involved in this whole thing. So it is an absolute pleasure to be welcoming not Mike Hardcore, not Bob Hardcore, but Joe fucking Hardcore on the Scoped Exposure podcast. Thanks for joining me, my friend.
I mean, it's very interesting to be on the opposite end of an intro like that. It is definitely rewarding to hear that the things that I put out into the world end up bringing people like yourself into the world. And then to see what you're doing with the podcast, that's that reciprocal water wheel that we always try to put into the work that we do. Whether it's a show, a fest, a band, things that we've done, it is rewarding in these instances, like they just said, where stuff that we did got picked up, it influenced you, and look at what you're now doing, reciprocating, and now you're influencing others. So if nothing else, I appreciate knowing that the things that I do have an impact on people.
It sure does, and I'm sure I speak for many, and I hope the intro that I just did give it just a little bit of justice. Joe, but for those that have been living under a rock, obviously This Is Hardcore is just around the corner, almost like a month as far as the time of recording this specific episode with you. And there's many other years of This Is Hardcore that that we can obviously talk about. Before we get into the music chats, it's an absolute must for us to do a Bev Check to kind of kickstart the episode. So it's tradition for the guests to go first to showcase what they got.
This is Jocko Go. Jocko Willink, old school hardcore guy, spiritual advisor, if you want to call it that. He has an amazing podcast and even a more celebrated amount of books and things. Jocko, for me, I'm a hardcore guy my whole life. I know people who are very close to him, his brother, etc. But the surreality of me connecting with podcasts and listening to it came from, you listen to a couple Rogan episodes, you listen to a couple different episodes. But when someone put me on to Jocko podcast, I was kind of thrown off by hearing his stories and his ability to not only cover books in the way he did in history, but also in general, everything about what Jocko presents has been a lot towards shaping how I do and correcting mistakes that I've made, which, it is a surreal thing to say. So along the way, Jocko created a company that does all this different things. And down the line, he ends up with a absolutely unbelievable energy drink that doesn't have any of the bad stuff in it. Doesn't have any of the bad sugars, the calories, for people who are keto, for people who are vegan. This is it. And he managed to get it into the Wawas, and his joke was kind of like, I want you to go in there, clear the fucking shelves out, show everybody that this is important. He was actually still very independent against the big wigs like the Red Bulls and the Monsters.
Sure. Yeah.
And this specific is a watermelon, but it's called the Whoop Assault, the watermelon flavor.
The whoop
And
Okay.
yeah, you can get these you get these in a lot of places now. Obviously, the big places, vitamin shops, and he's got a ton of different things under the Jocko Fuel, but the Jocko Go is the energy drink, and it's a must-have for me on most podcast days, just because it gives you that little bit of hit of those the additive effects of stuff like what Alpha Brain would do, where it helps you focus and be able to stay on top, especially since I do a lot of my podcasts at this kind of hour, like 6, 7 after work.
Right.
You know, I'm starting work at 6 a.m. So
yeah, you've already done a full day, so I really appreciate your time.
so getting on and having these, and it really does give you a little bit of focus, and also supporting a brand that's completely made in America and a real, like, you know, built up kind of hardcore dude who's a very professional individual. Yeah, it's good to support a brand that gives back, and that's what I do. So
can you check out the can a little closer so I can see the full thing?
Yeah, this is
we got the America Go.
Yeah, this is
we got the stars America and stripes Go. There.
Yeah, I'm born on 4th of July in Philadelphia, so
it's your birthday tomorrow?
It is my birthday tomorrow. I'll be 43
Happy
years old
birthday.
tomorrow.
I'll be the first to say it.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, and it is important, you know, as a union worker, to respect the people that are doing the right things, and you see the value put back into the community. Jocko started by helping a guy who is his partner push out these gis, these jujitsu gis, which obviously, being a jujitsu person, I was mind blown that they were made in America, completely in Maine. I'm like, oh shit, they gotta, you know, and little by little, as more people supported his original thing, Origin Maine, now he makes all sorts of products completely made in America, from Maine to South Carolina, which is important because we need to support products that we would use from our own country, because it gives people work. And when I was younger, I would work in places like factories before I end up getting into construction. So when I hear like people are trying to rebuild factories and not turn them into hipster lofts, I want to get behind that. So all the different reasons. And also, I've been working in construction for a long time, before there was even Red Bulls. And every day kids come in with these monsters and the lit cigarette, and they're like, yo, let's get ready to go to work. And I'm like, that's the worst way to start off the day health-wise. But all these Jocko Goes, whether flavor you're into, they're absolutely 100% good for you. They don't give you a weird sugar buzz drop at the end of it. And they're very tasty.
I mean, I kind of keep a mental running tally of certain bevs that make their debut, things I haven't seen before, and I didn't even know that he had a beverage of any kind. So I'll have to do some market research after.
Yeah, there's some really good flavors, and I mean, the thing that throws people off in the beginning was we had a flavor. He's like, I don't eat sugar, so I thought it was tasty. He's like, Then people came and said, hey, this isn't flavorful enough. So they added a little extra, but there's still no sugars. Like legitimately, there's no sugars. Everything's flavored by monk fruit. It's very healthy to actually eat it, drink an energy drink, which is another thing. Like,
you've sold me on it, Joe. So I'll have to check it out. It is, the end of the day for me as well. We actually, you were mentioning July 4th. We just had Canada Day up here, and it kind of, because it was on the Saturday, the holiday kind of falls on the Monday. So we've been chilling and just hanging out. So I'm going to be drinking a pale ale from a brewery up here in Ontario called Slake, and it's just called Hatch. So it's just kind of like a citrusy, bright pale ale. Just kind of like to ease into the back half of the day, I guess. So that's what I'm going to be sipping on.
I don't drink, so I know that about
you have nothing to add to that.
Yeah, like literally, I got a Mickey's B tattooed on me for when I was 18 years old. But
okay,
actually not 18. I probably even actually earlier. Probably was like 17, and that's not only a connection to the sweet malty beverage that were marketed towards the poor Irish in America, but also because of the neighborhood that my family's from. There was really the Mickey's crew, because they all drank it back in the 70s and 80s. So I got one of these tattoos from my family.
That's sweet. Well, I feel like we're already off to a great start here, Joe. So cheers to you, my friend. Really excited to do the
Yeah.
pod with you.
Cheers, man. And thank you for having me.
100%. So, Joe, like you've done a plethora of interviews. You have your own podcast. You've talked a lot about like, I guess like your hardcore journey and all those kind of things. So, leave my dog to fucking chill a little bit. But
Dogs on podcasts should be a positive thing. I love when dogs are on them, whether it's on mine or my dog who passed away earlier this year. He used to come and sit on my lap. The new girl, Berry, she'll pop in sometimes. I think it's important that people recognize that dogs do not care if you're recording a podcast.
Oh yes, yeah, it's very easy for them just to be like, no, we'll just do that. I don't know if you noticed, he's wearing a cone, so he's just kind of in,
he's in
an extra grumpy mood at the moment. So, so any new guest who comes here on the show, I always like to get a bit of someone's hardcore origin story. And like I was saying, like you've done so much and there's so much out there. So whether you want to do the super short version, the Cole's Notes version, or something.
I want to do the version that you're happy with for your episode. So whichever way you want to take this, we can take this. We can go.
I mean, we've got a lot that I hope that we can get into tonight. So I'll kind of leave it up to you. Like I'm not going to hit you with like a hard, a set time for your own hardcore origin story or anything. So
copy that.
All right.
Everything revolves back to childhood. Childhood was a mixture of different music. My mother being the forerunner and probably the most influential person in my early life. And without her, none of the stuff that would eventually happen would come to be. Mm-hmm. From the music that was on our floor, because all her albums were on the floor, late 70s stuff, early 80s, metal records still to this day haunt me. To think about the cool imagery, the Dios, the Ozzy Osbournes. You got to remember I was born in 1980. So by the time of the mid 80s, my mother and father were going through a lot of turmoil, and heavy metal was really, I think, a escape for her. Later, when they would finally separate, my mom was immersed in it. There was bands at our house, and I always say like we had a very wild heavy metal house in the mid to late 80s. And, I went from being a kid who played a lot of soccer to growing my hair out by the time I was 10 or 11 years old. And my mom was very open about allowing us to listen to these different kind of musics. As a weird time for people who may not understand this, but just getting records was starting to get hard because the cool shit had this dumb little sticker on the corner that said you had to be 13 to get it, because they had the
the parental
PMRC
advisory
sticker.
So okay.
The coolest records weren't available unless you had someone able to hook you up. Luckily, I had older cousins and people around that I was still able to get these cassette tapes, and which would later eventually be CDs. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it just comes from hearing heavy metal. Eventually Headbangers Ball was a thing when we could afford cable, and that influenced me greatly. And at a certain point in time, you get a little old where you're not just going to sit in the house all day. And my mom was kind of like, look, I mean, I was hanging out with kids who also listened to metal all over the neighborhood. And she's like, there's a street in Philadelphia called South Street, and the song is South Street, where all the hippies meet. But that was the place for us to go on the weekends and kind of like look at records and see all these cool freaks. And we weren't even really freaks. We were neighborhood people, which is kind of like a white trash working class kids who live under an L train. And it was our escape from a very bad neighborhood in the middle of the crack epidemic. And later, we started wanting to go to more than just the big rock concerts. My mom had taken me to quite a few rock concerts, big auditoriums, even though she had been involved in bands who were playing very small places. Most of the time I only went to the big auditorium shows. And so eventually she was kind of like realizing like this is a big focus for me. And instead of trying to inhibit me and say like, I don't like what this music it has offered. I mean, her fucking boyfriend's in a heavy metal band. She's playing heavy metal. So it was like,
right.
You became the heavy metal kid. And then eventually metal started getting a little softer, and there was cool shit like death metal and black metal. And then Headbangers Ball showed me a little piece of punk rock here, a little piece of punk rock there, some Biohazard, some old Cro-Mags videos, Slayer. And I started really wanting to be a part of whatever live music could just get me out of the neighborhood, actually as an escape from my regular life, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, I played Dungeons & Dragons a little bit, typical kind of shit that you would do. in that setting where you're a heavy metal kid. So that would lead up to me finding Biohazard and being on South Street. There was a venue, actually, it was two venues at the time that we're able to go to. One being the Theater of Living Arts, and there was this show. It said Biohazard, Sick of It All, Sheer Terror. And I was like, I want to go to this. We were already going to some other kind of shows at other places, but that was my first hardcore show, and I was 12 years old. And that was in 1992. Luckily, I had a bunch of older friends, so it wasn't like I was going by myself. I had a group of people. We all took the train down, just like we would for other concerts. And that perspective of seeing what hardcore punk was versus the heavy metal shows that we went to really got into me. And then all these things started adding up, these anarchy symbols, these DK symbols, the DRI symbols, all these cool band logos really just pushed me further and further, not away from metal, because I mean, it took a long time to really, I didn't shave my head until I was 16. And I was 1996, so I shaved my head. But there was a good 3 or 4 years of kind of going like, is this metal? Is this punk? What the fuck is this?
Right.
I saw a lot of really cool shit because my mom was really supportive of, in lieu of me sitting around the neighborhood where there was nothing to do but get into trouble, and let me go down to concerts. And then the rest kind of slowly came, you know, playing a little bit of music, knowing people in bands. Friends were in bands, so you're going to some of the local shows in the local churches, some of the local YCAs. You start realizing that the people around you are only able to go to these shows by being on this the elevated train system. I was at the first stop on that train, so you start meeting people as you're going to these concerts. Just because you're getting on the train and you're that guy looks like me, this guy looks like me.
Right.
Hey, didn't I see that guy the other day? And really all just culminated in being at a right place at the right time, doing the right activity, and eventually would lead me to eventually start doing shows and other things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always funny when you're driving to a show or to a venue that you've never been at and you're like, are we in the right spot? And then as soon as you can see it from a mile away, like the person with the Power Trip shirt or the whatever shirt, you're like, oh, okay, we're in the right neighborhood as far as where we're trying to go. But yeah, it's very interesting to hear how, like, you know, people who have like different upbringings, whether they were super exposed to heavier music or it was like, you know, they were generation one as far as their bloodline when it comes to listening to that. But it sounds like it was, the writing was on the wall already with you, and you just were able to fall deeper and deeper into it in a very organic and natural way.
It was a bizarre shit that 3 blocks away from my house was a venue that did hardcore punk shows when we were in, like, I was like 6, 7 years old. And I remember my uncle being like, everyone go inside, these punk rockers are going to come by. And I didn't really think about it. And it really didn't really put on to me till later on when I met a kid who was in my grade. We were on the same soccer team. His brother was in a band named after our record was named after our neighborhood. And they were basically the local band in the area. I kind of missed a bizarre opportunity to find hardcore at like 6 or 7 years old. It was 3 blocks from my house.
Sure.
Because those were where the shows were at. And then later on, we would do some shows in our neighborhood, and guys would be like, oh, we used to do shows right here. And it was kind of like a, fuck, man, I didn't realize all this shit was right around us.
Right.
You know, but we did come in at the right time. We had a lot of older guys who, like, from the guys in the Bad Luck 13, who their band hadn't started yet, but those were like the local hardcore guys that when we came in, because we had, you got to remember, it's bizarre to say, I'm one of the younger guys in a large group. So, you know, it was only able to go to these things because, you know, there was guys 2, 3, and 4 years older than me. So, like, we kind of like all dogpiled into these trains and these buses to go to these shows. But they linked up with the Bad Luck guys who were not even in Bad Luck 13 yet. And those were the standing order guys who had been going to shows in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, DC, and having that wellspring of people around us who were kind of like, you missed this band, you missed the group, like, you know, just basically telling us you missed everything. And you're like,
right.
Fuck, I missed all these bands? Shit. And I don't want to touch on another thing. It's funny you said finding venues by seeing people around. We are from the age before even MapQuest. So you would get an address, and there was flyers, and you could still see them where the directions were written on the flyer. And I used to, my first couple flyers, one of them I have right here, there's literally directions on the bottom. That's the first show I did right here in March 97. We would really handwrite directions to help people along because there was no internet. And I'll tell you, there was many a times, especially this place in Obsession, New Jersey, because it was out in Randolph, which is harder to find. We drive up there and just not be able to find it. It's kind of just drive around asking, you know where this is? Or no, but there was also times you're driving around and you're like, wait, I just saw this guy with a shirt, and you start following him. Hey, yeah, it's right here. Come on, follow us. All at the gas station, like serendipitously, more often than not, you had to look around and find people just to be able to get to these places. So I relate to what you were saying there.
Yeah, you had to really work when you had no Google Maps or anything to like really find the hardcore show. But that, that is not a strugle for a lot of the generation.
No,
that's
one. It better not
sure.
be for though. The comments and the inbox gets full of shit that's like all you could just Google. Like any question that's hit us the day of the show is like, I just want to look. Please fucking Google. Lazy.
The
fucker.
Amount of times, like I post a clip of a band and I get a comment saying, "Which band is this?" Like you can look at the tags. like, come on, please.
It just dumbed everybody down. To be honest with you, there's no creative problem solving. It's just like, hey, I'm stuck here. You have to unstuck me. It's like, well, if I unstuck you now, I got to unstick you every time a show happens. You got to figure this the fuck out.
Yeah. No, I think if hardcore's taught me anything, it's like being DIY and problem solving my way out of literally anything in life is like the only way that I view things. I want to fast forward a little bit here, Joe.
Absolutely. Please do.
This is Hardcore starts in 2006, but I want to know what came first, you playing in bands or you booking shows? I imagine bands first, but I'm just kind of curious on if booking shows came soon after that or there was a big lull there for you.
I was involved with a group of people who all had bands. Like that was like, you need to form around a core group. First, it was people who were finding these shows all together. And then the next natural step is people in the area start these bands to emulate the sounds they're enjoying. And although having music around me my whole life and being a weird kid, I didn't want to go to school if they had shop classes or something, I probably would have taken them. Mm-hmm. But they kind of just pulled that out. And I was in a mentally gifted program. So we were pushed more towards arts and music anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I took enough music classes to understand, core music theory. Eventually picked up a bass. I really didn't have the time in my ADHD brain to really be calm enough to play regular 6-string guitar, but the affinity for the Lemmy Kilmisters, the Cliff Burtons, and even later on the crazy punk rock shit that I would get into, sure. I always found like the bass player was the most threatening member of the band. Whether it was Sid Vicious or other people, like the bass player to me was like, and also my mom's boyfriend, one of them was a really good bass player, and that had a little influence. So I picked up enough to play bass in a really shitty band who thankfully digitally does not exist, so I never talk about their name, but that gave me the ability to kind of not just be a fan or a supporter, but also get on stage. And we only played about 6 shows, but it was enough to continue to formulate the kind of networking that you would need to do shows. Mm-hmm. We would eventually play with people like Dysphoria, Suburban Hoods, all these people that eventually become very important to what would happen after. But the key thing I learned is the ability to deal with a local promoter. And it's kind of started out just us being in another show and there not being a lot of people. I come up to him and said it was a smart ass because I'm a smart ass at 15. Like, we could have brought more people here if you had us out here. And he gave us these like Monopoly cards, super thick with tickets. He's like, bring 4 bands. You got to all together sell at least 60 tickets. Here's the date of the show. You see if you can pack this fucking place. So me and 3 of our friends' bands, we packed this fucking place. And then all of our friends' bands, little by little, would start to like, hey, I'm going to do a show. I'm going to do a show. I'm going to do a show. And we played that place quite a few times. And eventually kind of realized that we were not very good. And I realized the aesthetics of what we are. Like, again, I'm still more of a metal, like, like in my heart, yeah, I'm fucking hardcore kid. But you start doing that like little kid to grown men comparison. You're like, man, it's kind of funny. I have old pictures of myself, and it's kind of like not embarrassing. It's like, dude, look what you were wearing. What the fuck were you doing? And it's funny, but I realized truly I was wasting time in this band because we weren't of that caliber, and it was just something fun to get on stage. And I'll never take anything away from it. It was a lot. I learned a lot. about the way to start. And what really got me on my feet to doing these shows is this place stopped doing shows. So my mother, having been involved in booking metal bands, she kind of already had oh yeah, you can easily do this, blah, blah, blah. And she even helped us get the hall for the very first show, which I did on my own right
Oh,
here.
okay.
And it was basically, we had a friend who had a PA. We paid him $120. We paid the club like $150. We put a bunch of names on the flyer and we did the show. And then there was more shows. But what was interesting is that I was already in my head going way past what I was able to do. And this is not the email years. This is the handwrite a letter to a band years. So I was writing lots and lots of letters and contacting people to say, hey, I'm Joe. At the time, it was kind of like almost like a mocking joke. As I said, like, call me Joe Hardcore. If you look at me, I don't know what I was, but it was kind of like almost like a tease. That's Joe Hardcore. But it's a name I got when I was 13. But by the time I was 16, turning 17, from traveling already and doing shows, I'd already contacted a lot of people. And all of a sudden, kind of like you put a lot of work out and it doesn't happen. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, what? Next thing you know, you have a bunch of people writing you letters or calling your house. Hey, I've got a show coming here. Can you hook up this band? And that's how the ball started rolling.
Mm. So just out of curiosity, because again, the writing of letters, and even emails is like before my time for sure. But like, I'm kind of curious on like were people quick to respond? Like, I say quick to respond when it comes to writing a letter because it's got to go through postage. Like, I'm just kind of curious on like, you get a letter for an offer for a show. Do you go to band practice that week and then you write a letter back? Like, was it pretty quick, or is it like, because nowadays you could send an instant DM to anybody in the world to offer them a show, but they still might not get back to you for 3 weeks. So I'm kind of curious if it was like way slower or about the same to actually lock down a band.
It's the slowest thing in the world. It was great. Fucking great. I actually miss it. I miss it entirely. Like the first time I wrote Vogel, he was in despair. And I was like, I love your band. I want to do a show. Mm-hmm. Then I got a letter. Hey, we just played a show in Philly, which, we're like, yeah, no shit. But like, especially at that time, maybe as I got a little bit older, I started being better with I just never wanted to bother band guys. And then eventually, once I got that reality in my head, like the band guys are the same dudes on the floors. And the minute that hit me, like, all right, they're me too. Okay, cool. So then like that social barrier got broken down. I was more confident to speak to people in bands. And that did speed it up. But yeah, you would write a letter, and if the guy wasn't on tour, like Vogel was always on tour, the most you might get is letter. Hey, missed this letter. Sorry, I was on tour. We're actually got this new thing. Would you want to do blah, blah, blah? That's how I booked the Buried Alive's first Philly show in 1998, was because he's like, hey, I'm kind of getting done with Buried Alive. Despair, but if you want to book my band Buried Alive, we're doing a run. Can you do a show?
Right.
So sometimes serendipitously it works out, and sometimes you never got back, or sometimes you'd write people like Jamie Jostley, he would send you stuff. Hey, check out Push Button Warfare. Check this out. It was very cool. You always got extra stickers, and occasionally someone would say, faster if you call, and then you get the number. And then so another aspect of the 90s hardcore scene was these little things. Actually, I have a thing on the table.
Oh, yeah. Show and tell is always welcome here.
This is like the size of it. Only this one's super funny. It says shit like this.
Let's take that offline.
Only this is it was called a dialer. Previous to the digital way that telephones would work nationally, they were working on a different system. So you would press in the number. Doesn't matter if it was Canada or whatever. You would press in and you would hold up the telephone, and that thing would go, and it would tell the phone company, this call has been paid for, and you're basically stealing long distance phone calls.
Yeah.
And that was the basis for so many people being able to work long distance. So that became the thing. And then they would call your house, or you would call them with a dialer, or they would call you if they had like the people who could afford like the long distance calls. And you would talk to people on the phone. You talk to them like being like a different version of a pen pal. You had people you'd write. There's people that would call you. And for years, people would call my mom's house way after we were starting to be in the emails when I stopped living there. Hey, I'm calling for Joe. And she'd have like, hey, Joe, this guy from New York, he needs a show. What the fuck? Like, I just
Says he
finding
plays
my,
in this band. Yeah.
yeah, literally, like, she's like a fucking built-in secretary at the house, especially when we
Mhm.
started touring. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was longer, but there was something more personal because today I book a show through a booking agent, or maybe the guy jumps on the show. I don't even know the fucking guy's name. I don't even. I might randomly know their at name, but I feel like for the volume of bands that I book, I know the people in the bands currently who we do much less. And I kind of get these stupid answers like, "Oh, you're kind of intimidating," or "I wasn't," and it's like, dude, I'll talk to anybody. Like it's a weird, surreal thing where guys who I may have done 3 or 4 shows with in the history of us doing shows. You're talking about from 1997. I know better than guys who have done 7 shows in the last 2 years for,
Right.
because the communication was all on the telephone and it was in person, and now it's internet and no bother. So I kind of miss the old days in some ways, but it would have been impossible to book it This Is Hardcore completely by letters.
Yeah. Yeah, that at least when like the time of that coming into the picture, you know, you had a few extra tools at your arsenal to pull off something of that magnitude. But it is interesting to hear how like your first like booking experiences are like not like I'm a booking person now. It's just like I want to do a, like not a one off, but just I want to do a hardcore show, and your other friend wants to do that, and someone else wants to do it. Was that first experience was like maybe your like you just had the itch for it more, and your other friends were like, yeah, like I'm good just playing guitar or drums or whatever, but you were like, I want to keep this train going.
This whole thing's meant my entire life. And I know that sounds weird because what people sometimes garnish from that is that I don't have a full ass other life. It's like I've got children, I've got hobbies, I've got, I'm a Freemason. There's a lot of things I do
Right.
besides hardcore. But if you go back to the root of every integral person, aside from my sister and my mother and like blood family members, everything of value to me in life has come from someone in the hardcore scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like my closest friends, every girlfriend, wife, and like every person that has come through my life, good, bad, the opposite, connections now made. I mean, to the point where I got into a union because of a guy I met in 1996 and had been friends with. That changed my life. There's so many just important community-based interactions that become lifelong friends, or just their own thing. And I can be honest with you and say that I lived in a very fucking bad neighborhood, and being a goofball white kid, and when everyone was like fucking carrying guns and selling crack was a little odd, but the ones who were like us all kind of hung out, and I always felt a little bit like the minor threat thing, a little bit out of step with regular fucking people. My dad was on crack, wasn't really around, and then when he came around he was kind of an asshole. So I didn't have this like normal father figure to kind of like, this is what everybody else does. So then I was kind of like left to my own to read a lot of fucking books, read a lot of weird shit. It was kind of, my mom was really good in being able to not filter what came in. So I steered myself to the things that drove, like actually was interested in, and drove myself to it. So socially, as hardcore just becomes a bigger part of my life, to answer your question without being too roundabout here, there are people that start bands and then a chick, a job, or just not really feeling the next 3 bands that came out. Hardcore truly is in a sonic wave. You have the high points and these low points, and depending on where you jump in at, you're like right now I think we're at the crest of a high point, and the next couple of years may drop lower because we're about 3 years into the pandemic scenario, where so many people found hardcore through this internet, and now they're living it, and it might just I did that enough, and so by proxy of me realizing the value of the community and loving the people in it, and also because I kind of had the opportunity to do something that was not common for my area. I mean, at 19 years old, I was pretty well traveled. I thought just for going to like Detroit and Chicago and up and down the East Coast with Dysphoria, and then we go on a whole U.S. tour. And it's kind of like a video game. It kind of like unlocks new areas for you. Oh shit, there's these bands in these other places. Now I can take my band and we can play in California. And that's what me and Mike did. We were on this tour with Dysphoria as roadies. We get to California and we were like, we are coming back in a year and we're fucking playing California. And we did that with Punishment. We fucking got a really shady situation with a van. And we got a band together and we came back and did California. And it becomes these little iterative decisions. Let's do a demo. Let's play, let's do this. Let's try to get a record. Let's go back on tour. And these little things, like if one side of my life story was, hey, I did this, and this in hardcore. Yeah, it looks like that was my primary focus. But I had jobs. We went to Phillies games. We hung out in the neighborhood, got in a ton of fights, played a lot of sports. We were in one of the craziest things about Philadelphia hardcore was, just to give you an example, in 2002, every Wednesday at a local college, they had a turf field. Most of the hardcore scene hung out on this centrifuge.net. So we would get together Wednesday nights and play soccer against each other. Then we would get ready and go to the goth night and hang out. There was shit beyond just the hardcore show.
Sure.
But it became so much of these are the people I know. These are the people I love. These are the things I do, that the people who, and I see them all the time, like, dude, it's crazy you still go to shows. And now I got all these friends like, dude, I love that you do the podcast. I got kids and shit, so I can't come. But, dude, you keep us all in the middle of it. Like, it's surreal that they still are connected now with the wave of the internet and the podcast and the social medias. But there was just something in me. I mean, and I'll never denigrate anybody who's focused on their living and their whole life is traveling as a band person. God bless them. But, we grew up in I had a kid at a young age and then some other kids and, having to be there and make money. And actually, I think going to work was the only structure I've ever had in my life. Like, doesn't matter what we do. I got to get up and go to work in the morning. And that kind of stuff really kept me from falling off the fucking edge of the earth into even more chaos that would come later.
Yeah.
But I value the friends that I had back when I was, whether it was fucking 13 to fucking now, and whether they go to shows whenever they want or they don't go to shows and they just randomly, dude, I just saw this flyer that looks sick, or hey, do you remember this? It's great that we still have that connection that is hardcore.
This is kind of like a follow-up to that question, but it's also kind of like trying to broaden it a little bit. Do you think that, because I think you and I are similar in the same way that we have a lot of ideas and a lot of things that we want to do. And obviously you have almost a whole decade on top of what you've done in the hardcore scene. But sometimes I wonder if people are called into doing different roles in the hardcore scene, whether it's like booking a fest, filming shows, starting a podcast, whatever it is, or if that's just something that person was gonna do, but they were just in hardcore, so it just kind of got connected that way, if that makes sense. So I guess the question that I wanted to pitch to you and get your thoughts on is are people called to do a specific thing if they're truly obsessed with this stuff, or is it just something that serendipitously just happens? They were just wired a certain way and they also like breakdowns,
Well, I think those two things kind of have a connection. So, serendipity plays a role in placing you in the proper position to do the next thing. But your innate abilities, your innate leanings are going to put you to them. Yeah, you want to. I don't even know what would make me say I want to get up on stage, but there was things that influenced me that just wanted to get on stage and play a fucking fuck you, and we were terrible. But then
right.
you get around all these people and they're like, yo, you should do this, you should do that. It's like, yo, I should do that. I should try this. I should, you start wanting to play more shows and then you realize fuck, you got to connect with people. Ultimately, everything is a prerequisite, so to speak. So, you can't show up your day 2 of hardcore shows and book a festival. But day 2, you can walk up to somebody and say, hey, I don't really know what's going on here, but can I help out? What can I do? Or, hey, you know what? I used to play music. Can I start something? There's always a way you can initially start. And it's not unlike a video game where you kind of start leveling up. Experience gives you the opportunity to see what else is out there. And there's things that people gravitate towards. To me, I balanced myself out by traveling and getting in trouble and being an asshole until I was about 26 years old, which is right around the time where the fest really took up a majority of the things that really excited me. I still did tons of shows and was still at a ton of shows, but the fest gave me a different quest to follow. But early on, it was, what's the next tour? What's the next show? What else can I do? And I think that people who are driven and excited by not only, I don't know what the word would be for when you play a show, whether it's the exhilaration or the fulfillment, but I know that that's kind of a bottle that never gets fully empty, and you're always trying to fill it back up. Like you're constantly like, all right, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? If you have that in you, is where you find the doers and the makers and the people that aren't good with saying, yeah, I played in this band, we did 1 7-inch, then we broke up because one guy didn't want to be in the band anymore, and now I just work at Home Depot, dude. Like there's guys like that, dude. There's guys like that, and I respect the shit out of them. You did something, but there's something innate in every person who has done it for a very long time or has picked it up and doing it now. Like longevity speaks volumes to dedication and also the interaction. But there are people who, in their own time, in their own area, in their own circumstance, put in the work, and for whatever their reason is, didn't get the same amount of kind of reward to continue on their path. But they said, I've done enough and I want to try something else. That's especially with musicians. Like, if you want to delve into like the Walter Schreffels, there's these beautiful musicians in hardcore who start out at level 1. They're playing like the old school shit, and little by little, they start expanding their own interests musically. They start expanding what they can play, and they want to do more. But obviously, Walter being attached to Gorilla Biscuits, he's always going to want to go back to that because of what the core value that is to him.
Right.
And I find that in that same vein, there's people who, there's promoters who stick around. I'm lucky, on the verge of being 43 years old. I booked my first hardcore show when I was 16, turning 17. And I still look forward to doing shows. I played shows when I was 15, turning 16. I still look forward to playing shows. The difference is I know that to value and continue the rest of my natural life, I got to get up and go to work in the morning. So I have to balance when a bit like, we just played Chicago. I know I could take a day or two off of work because I can afford it to go do this. If I had to do a 30-day tour, I don't know if I could fiscally afford to do a 30-day tour. It kind of keeps you grounded, and God bless the bands that have made their living doing this, because they're the ones that carry the flag all year and all over the country and all over the world. Because without them, a lot of this stuff would have petered out in some way, So it's kind of a balance of what kind of person you are, what innate abilities you have, and then what strikes you as most interesting. After this hardcore being, 17 years into doing this, there's still bands I haven't gotten. I still haven't cracked the code on some things. There's a lot to still do before it's time to go, I did everything I want to do and I don't want to do it no more.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you kind of mentioning like one of the first things that you said that like really resonated with me is just the experience. Just experiencing the culture will show you the things of like the gaps, like the things that are like awesome about it and the things that could be improving. And like, at least for me, like I grew up, like a lot of people I think there are people, as soon as they see someone start a podcast or they start doing this, they think that's their introduction, or maybe they like move to an entirely they move across the country to an entirely different hardcore scene, and then they don't know the context of like the 5, 6, 7, 8 years of that person playing in bands, doing whatever that they were doing in the midst of all that. But yeah, I think it is necessary to, like you said, like kind of get into the mix of like not being like a sole individual that's booking a fest or doing stuff like that, but like at least like getting involved in like, hey, maybe I can't play an instrument, but maybe like I can help clean up at the end of the show, and then you make connections with those people, and then you want to like help run doors at the next show, and then that blossoms into something else. And yeah, like I think it's really important. Like I think we have a new generation coming in, which is really, really exciting, but I think they want to like go zero to hero at times and don't want to do like kind of read the room and assess like I'm lower on this food chain, which doesn't mean that, I can like work my way up or not even like it's a ladder per se, but just being a little more self-aware to like, there's some dues to be paid and some ways that you can still be involved without having to go straight to like front person of the hottest band you're seen within a month of being in hardcore,
It's a very important thing that you touched on right here. And one of the easiest ways we've been speaking about already is like the video game analogy. It's like you got to level up.
Mhm.
Hardcore, if you want to be a Twitter person who just talks every day about it, or you want to do something but you want immediate like commendation and accreditation. Oh, this is the best. It's like, dude, no, it takes time. Your first thing's not going to be your best thing, and no one wants your first thing to be the greatest.
Mhm.
You have to, I feel like, as a real community and as our culture, you do have to immerse yourself. And it's something I see lacking is that a person who, and it's not out of, you're an idiot, but it's like, okay, you found out about hardcore. Let's take some time to immerse yourself. Why don't you I'm not saying take a fucking 4-year course on hardcore punk from 78 to current time, but remember that since this is new to you, there are things that you may feel that have not happened, but really they happen. You're just unaware of it. So a typical new person shows up and, it's hard for them because they only know the persons that they come with in the room. They may only know a couple people. Now with the internet, it's a little easier because I hear people meet hardcore people through Discord now and Reddit. So there's always been these like webs, especially since the web thing really started being a thing in like the late 90s, early 2000s. There are tons of people that came to a couple hardcore shows and they live there forever online talking about the 5 shows they've been to and how everything in hardcore now sucks. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about someone who's finding hardcore and they don't know their place. It's like a simple thing is to immerse yourself. Instead of sticking to your small coterie, your small 3 or 4 friends, reach out. Hey, I'm this person. I'm that person. 90% of people in hardcore, God willing, are going to be affable and respectful that you're here, and they're going to have a conversation with you. And then you start connecting with people that are just not in your own friend group. Then you're able to learn a little bit more because of the kind of things that interest me. I always ask questions. I loved I should have mentioned back when I was going to South Street, and then when I was in 8th grade, turning into high school, I only went to a high school downtown, so I could be close to the South Street. And I really didn't go to that much 9th grade. I went to South Street a lot and read hardcore punk zines and metal zines, watched people skateboard and do graffiti and beatbox. And that was and do battle rhymes on South Street. I thought that was cooler than fucking 9th grade. And then I ended up going to my neighborhood school the second time. And then we were all finding the same kind of music, and that's kind of how we all congealed. But I think that if you stay within your own social group, you're only gonna network within, and you're not gonna see everybody else. If you do not reach out and say, "Hey, how do I help?" and the way to help, I mean, dude, just standing outside and helping us hand out flyers at any Philly hardcore shows is help. Hey, stay 5 minutes and help us get a couple of these trash bags upstairs at the First Unitarian Church. That's help. Because the minute that someone stands after a show that's going on for 5 hours, and then we were there 2 hours before, you see that we stay an hour and a half after, that might inject you with the respect of the venue that, wow, this place really has to get cleaned up so other people can use the room. That in itself could be really impactful in getting you excited because you're not only a part of a thing, but you're helping a thing continue to grow. Whereas you're just on the Twitter, the Instagrams, these social medias, you're really not getting a real life experience. And then where you said like where people can go, there's so many little things. I get better at time in respecting new people trying to raise their voice. And I love when a young person raises a zine. And in fact, if I had a history of, I wish I would knew the age of every person who ever wrote everything in a zine, because as a zine collector, there's tons of shit that is just trash or fucked up and wrong. But that person probably was just young and trying to give their opinion and be a part of something. It's actually something I miss about the zines, which is not a derail, but people doing zines, you get to have your little impact. This is how I feel about something, which the social media is fucked up because someone may have an opinion that's not congruent with what everybody else wants, but it's their opinion. But because of social media, 200 people say you're fucking stupid because you don't think the Never Ending Game new record's great.
Yeah.
I let the person have that opinion. You don't have to agree with them, but it's cool that he took his time to write it and print it and post it and hand it out to somebody.
Yeah.
I give people more credit who takes a little bit of time to do something. Whether I agree with it or not, I respect someone's effort because they're trying. And I know that effort spent will give some kind of experience that may place them in a position to later expand on that experience and do more things.
Yeah.
And I find in tandem with what you're saying, the guy who shows up and he just wants to be in the band that everyone's cool. It's like everybody wants to be the cool person, but what's really cool? Like
right.
you're up there, like, I mean, there's a lot of different examples of that where people kind of their stock really high and they didn't really understand the culture, and then they do something really dumb and then it's all over for them.
Right.
You know, the long, slow game of learning and meeting people, respecting venues, doing the thing, it gives you this great alternative existence to just being someone who gets up at the alarm clock, goes to work, come home, eats the food, watches the TV, and goes to bed and do it all over again. And that's really the greatest reward that hardcore has given me, is an alternative way to live my life day in and day out. And I think that the people that are able to understand this, it's hard because you know, you're new, you're just excited, but there's so many pathways to this. You could be a photographer, videographer, you could, you know, there's so many things. It's not just in the scene, but just things that you get exposed to. There's people that find out about different political stances and then they start getting on those paths and then they become really involved in that stuff. All of these are really positive things. They just break you from being the mold of someone who just gets up, goes to work, buys the shit they're supposed to, says the shit they're supposed to, and goes to bed when they're supposed to. And I think that that's something that gets lost because they think, oh, it's just dumb bands. It's like, is it just bands? Because how many people do you know create a band to play in some fucking basement for 20 minutes while everybody kicks each other, everyone's sweating all over? There's no true value money to be made. Very few people in hardcore, unless you do it for a very long time and you've built this empire up to do so, actually make a credible living against just getting up and going to work every day. Right. So there has to be sweat equity involved. There has to be things that make it worth it. And I think that people miss that in trying to worry about popularity or being right with everyone who's cool. Yeah. I think immersion and taking your time and trying to do cool shit count 10 times more than just trying to be the coolest person in the room.
Right. Yeah. I think I think what's interesting to me is that there are people, I don't think that there's anything wrong if you like hardcore, but you only have time to do one thing. And that one thing could be playing in bands or playing in one band or being the scene photographer or what have you. But I think like a lot of the people that inspire me, that I admire, that have like really, in my opinion, not only like changed like their own local scene, but like change the game entirely, are the people that do like the multiple things, like the people that play in two bands but they also take photos at a show, or the people that have a podcast and play drums and also run a zine. And something that's been at least interesting for me is that Scope started as like kind of like a way for us to document the stuff that was happening up here, but now that we have the podcast, it's like kind of it's a cool thing to be able to have people on where I can talk about their first time in Canada or like the impact that they had when they were really active in playing different shows up here. And I'm sure like you can speak to some of that with like, you know, you're able to, yeah. As far as like being
I can tell you exactly everything about the first time in Canada. No, I, not to cut you off, but I think that you're touching on something that's important. The new outlet of the podcast is the fastest growing way to continue the culture, and it's one of the more positive ways to continue the culture because, unlike in the zine present, now granted, you could do the thing that where you can just get on your own podcast and say, "I think this fucking guy sucks," or "I think this record sucks." Allowing through interviews to let the person, the subject of this episode, their life or their interests get heard by someone, you're continuing to grow the interest overall the entire scene. Because then someone's gonna say, "Oh, what's this Joe guy did? What did he do? What else did he guy do?" You know, like you're also putting a person on display for other people to say, "What's this person about?" or "What's this thing about?" And it's something that I feel strongly about with my own podcast, is that allowing people to listen to others in our community speak, especially when it's long form, and get a varied history, or get these intimate details. I think that it helps connect everybody, and I've heard that a lot from people, like, "Oh, when you said this really connected me," or "When I heard this guy did this, I was amazed because I went to the same school." Just 30. It's very interesting when people understand the amount of common denominators that everyone shares. I think podcasts allow that much more than when you're reading a flat form thing like a zine, and it's just a PR thing, like, "This band's the greatest band on the earth." Well, what do we know about the people? What do we know
Right.
about why they did this record? I
Right.
think that, and exactly what you're saying is true. The thing that I can relate to easily is that at a certain time I started being involved in medievalism. Some people may call it LARPing. I didn't really LARP. I never broke the Joe Hardcore character. If there was a Joe Hardcore character, I was just kind of Joe. You know, that's Joe. He's
Sure.
tattooed.
Yeah.
He's a fucking maniac. But what I learned is not only there was a parallel universe here. These people are doing DIY shit. They're making their own clothing, their own weapons. They have so much similar to hardcore punk. It was mind blowing. It was like, oh shit, this epiphany. Like, what the fuck? And I realized it does come down to when you get involved, whether it's a church group or a local group, you're gonna find the people that aren't just, hey, I just come here to fight. Let's go home after. No, that fighter.
I just come here to cast magical spells and.
Well,
and
that's the
I
thing
go
is,
home.
whenever I start talking about the armor shit, immediately like, oh, did you guys LARP? There was no magic in it. It was more like it's more like it was really a social culture first.
Okay.
Then a little bit of the sport aspect by the fighters who were good. You're like, oh shit, like, oh, here's how I wear this elbow pad under this thing, so I have a little bit of this. Like, there's the jockish, but there was
it's
a lot
not just hacking and slashing. There's a little bit of like, I actually
oh yeah, I mean, like,
know how to. Okay,
there was some funny shit. Like, I mean, I've always been I've always been connected to things that are considered nerdy, and I've always walked the path of being shit on at the time when I'm doing it, and then years later it becomes the coolest shit on earth.
Okay.
And it's just like, what, like, you know, as a kid, long hair. Oh, you fucking, you know, the amount of nasty words said to me about being a long hair in the 80s and 90s is ridiculous. The amount of being in the metal. Me and Chris X and a bunch of guys would go to goth nights. We were like, oh, you're in the goth nights, like, and all this shit after we were into it becomes cool. It's fucking retarded. It's literally fucking retarded. Like, literally, like anything that we did because we're older, someone made fun of us for, and now it's like, wait, this is all cool now? Fuck you.
Yeah.
We didn't have any of this shit. People
We paved the way for you for it to be cool.
Well, and so the same thing, like the SCA, which is Society for Creative Anachronism, gave me a sidestep when not only hardcore was hard, but my life was hard. And I just needed somewhere where I wasn't the Joe Hardcore person. I was just a dude. And I kind of slid in some ways. I did an SCA event, which is like where people did a bunch of fighting, actually in the same venue where we did the first This Is Hardcore's at. Like, I found out, and this is to the point I was trying to make. People have innate abilities and they're driven towards things. I get in the SCA and I find people who are fighters who run classes on how to do, and it's just this amazing art thing. And there's people who just are there to help out that event. Hey, all right, so when you do this event, there's gonna be 5 or 6 people you've never met before. They're gonna help you run it because their whole deal is that they run the event. And I'm like, really? They just run it? Like, it was so surreal. And I just kept seeing these parallels to these people that had 5 or 6 jobs in the society, the SCA, and they were drawn to, oh, I do this, but I also do this. And then I was kind of like, for me, I was the person who started bringing youth fighting down to Philadelphia because I realized we had all these kids and no one was able to work with the kids. So I did all this. Hey, how do I get kid fighting down here? I had a kid. My daughter was involved in it. Our daughters were trying to get involved in it. And we started the local fighter group. And that's an epiphany that I hit. Like, wherever I was going to go, I was going to end up doing something like, well, what else can I do? What else can I do this? And then honestly, the only thing ever inhibit me with time in the society of the SCA and just, I don't have the time. You know, I have the work, I have shows, you know, I get all this other shit, you know, like I get to a point 3 years ago where I was doing jujitsu, running shows and doing SCA fighting and traveling for all of this shit. So I was like, and you know, like there's a lot of crazy shit that you put onto yourself because you get excited and you want to do more. And there's tons of shit I woulda, coulda, shoulda in the SCA because I started in the January of 2007 that I haven't accomplished yet just because of time I had to put into my real life, time I had to put with work, family, structure to keep things going, and also with shows. Like I couldn't put it all together. Then
and that's right at the start of This Is Hardcore. So if you didn't make space for something, like who knows, we might not even be sitting down here, you know?
Well, so, the thing that comes from all this is that people have, we're going to dial it back. People have innate abilities or interests, and sometimes they're afraid to reach out or do it, or there's not a mentorship or people even saying maybe some of the things I'm saying, like, not that you should just go off and do it on your own, but if you're interested in doing something, there are people like me, Bob Wilson, John Scanlon, anyone in your local area. 99.999% of the time, no one who's involved either booking shows or being in bands are going to go, fuck you, we don't want you to try. No, because that's not how the scene grows. It gets a little edgy when you start trying to do your own record label, and you might be trying to go after a band someone's trying, but there's still so many things written on the internet and so many other people that have done record labels or know what to do that'll help you out. Just in the same thing in the same way with the SCA stuff. Everybody who's already achieved what they're achieved. They're not afraid of you overachieving them. So all they're going to do is help you grow and help the scene grow and continue on what's been going on. That's been my experience. And I think that's something that people may have not heard other people say, but you're not going to start off day one and do it. This is hardcore off the bat.
Right.
I didn't do this is hardcore off the bat. Luckily I had Sean Agnew of R5 Productions. We can get into if you want to get into when we talk about that. But in reality is everybody comes into something new, like level 0, and they level up if they want to level up, or they walk away complaining. Well, this person wouldn't let, and so no one's ever not let. You're the only person that inhibit your abilities. Now, you might try to do something that's already being done. So then you're going to have a limited capacity to what you're going to be able to be successful at, because people who are already doing it are already at that level, and that's where you have to find your niche way of like, all right, well, I can't do exactly what that person, but maybe there's something I can do that somebody else hasn't done, or how can I help that person continue? Like there's things you can do. And I think that kind of gets left out because the social media has kind of taken up a giant portion of what people think's important.
Sure. And maybe just and I rarely do this on the podcast actually, but just to maybe play devil's advocate, I think anyone that like wants to do something that might be a little, more innovative, or like something that's a little off the beaten path of like what's been established through the hardcore scene, it might not be met with like hostility of fuck you and you can't do that, but there might be some silent, we're just not going to entertain the idea, which is totally allowed. If someone, like, everyone's allowed to have an opinion, whether they want to, like, no one's saying, is there a direct,
like, let's play around here. Is there something direct that you could just throw out so I have a better understanding of the perspective you're coming at here? Like an example of like something that's a little bit off the beaten path.
So I guess you're talking
musically, or you're talking about like a show. Like I'm trying to understand better.
Yeah. So I think I was trying to kind of segue into like, one of the questions I wanted to come at you, Joe, is, this is hardcore in my opinion, and I kind of shared this in the intro. Like, in my opinion, like, this is hardcore is its own entity, and then I look at something like Sunny and Hate 56 as its own entity. But
absolutely,
at least from an outsider's perspective, I have seen, like, I'm sure there's a timeline where, you could have very easily just told Sonny when he reached out as far as like wanting to get involved or film or offering his services. You could have been like, because that wasn't really established, or that wasn't really something that was like common practice of, at least from, what we see today. So I guess like I wanted to kind of like go back to that specifically, and, because Sonny is,
I could give you that whole thing.
Please. Yeah.
So there was a time where there was a guy named Seth from Floating Boy Media, correct? And he was super, like, kind of like, have you ever seen Ghostbusters? He was like the accountant character. Okay. Glasses, super affable, but kind of like funny, awkward socially. And he had a camera and was like, hey, I'm trying to document these things. And he had been doing it before This Is Hardcore really got started, because again, he's from that centrifuge.net world. And he had been around and he was shooting some stuff. So when This Is Hardcore first started happening, he was still getting his ducks in a row, but he was always welcome to come to shows. And I don't think people really had valued YouTube at that point. It was like it would take another year or two to really start picking up the pace on what YouTube was. But Seth Floating Boy was shooting some films. He actually did a really good job in 2005 of filming our benefit show for our friend Dan Stone, who died. And this is like the year before. This is like the culmination of like, this is when the primordial soup of This Is Hardcore was brewing.
Sure.
And he released this DVD, and later on, when I did the Versus Hardcore, he was like, "Yo, can I shoot it?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I don't know what we're gonna do with it, but it was still, like 2005 was the end of Hellfest, the end of Posse Numbers, and that's where the Sound of Fury is the original Sound of Fury. Then This Is Hardcore started, and then a year later, United Blood would come in. So for the first 2 years, it was Seth Floating Boy, and then the third year, my friend John from Eulogy from Morning Again is a long time friend of mine. He said, "Hey man, this thing's starting to pick up. Would you mind if Eulogy releases this DVD?" Because he's thinking, just like the Hellfest DVD that was big in 2001, this could be it. And I said, "Hey man, I don't need anything financially from you. I got a guy, Seth. He'll shoot it. We'll make it happen." I always have a belief, if you are doing something and you're investing something and it's accessory to This Is Hardcore, I don't really need fiscal reward for it. That's your project. At the end of the day, it will eventually promote and help This Is Hardcore. And that's the key thing I give a fuck about. Like, if it puts us in a good light and it helps more people know about it, then great. I don't need money from it. You do you make money, you keep your thing going, and hopefully it helps us out. And so that's how that got started. And then,
but just to quickly jump in, there's also a little bit of risk that you're taking if like, does this, like, I assume that you're not looking at this person's, like, you're kind of going a little bit off of faith to be like, I'm going to give you a shot, but like,
yeah, well, that's exactly how it worked. And I'll get when it gets to the Sunny thing. Yeah. So John and Seth didn't really get along, and there was a lot of bad faith there where Seth was kind of pissed off that he didn't have final say. And John's like, "This doesn't look great, and I'm not paying for it, blah, blah, blah." And that kind of put me in well, I guess the DVD thing's over. And I guess in hindsight, it was probably, the DVD came out. If you have it, you have it. If you don't, you don't.
Right.
But I didn't ever really put a lot of like, this is it. This is the big one. This is going to make this hardcore huge, So I kind of felt bad. And Seth kind of had a bad taste in it. And I was, I told him like, "Hey, man, you're an entrepreneur here, man. You got to do what you got to do. I have nothing to do with this. Besides, I also don't want some shitty coming out with our name on it because it makes us look dumb." Mm-hmm. And right around that time, Sonny had started. So he wrote me again because of Centrifuge and, "Hey, dude, what do you think about me doing this?" Told him the same thing. "I really don't know if anyone will care, but if you need anything, please let me know. And I look forward to you being a part of this." Mm-hmm. Is roughly what I said. I probably could. I don't know. I think I had a different email I think I changed my email over in like 08 or 09. So I don't have any of them early 2000s emails.
Sure.
But essentially it was something like that. And I when he showed up, I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's the guy." Cause he had a different name on the Instagram or on Centrifuge. So once I was like, "Oh yeah, this is the dude." Okay, cool. And that's it. Now today, Sonny is one of my best friends. We've had fuck you level, fuck you. Like, we have some of the best conversations. We talk at like 2:30 in the morning. I was at his house when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Like, you grow with people. And I didn't know what to do because I'm not a techie. I'm not a complete loser when it comes to the internet, but I don't know where someone's going to interact. And so I didn't know what the value was to he or I. But if someone's going to take the time to put something into it and it's something to do with our project, it's like, man, what if this guy really does something cool with it and we're missing out? And so luckily the combination worked out, and what he's done since then is pretty spectacular, regardless of recent developments and people detracting now that he's very popular. I think that what he did in his own capacity to grow the culture and bring accessibility to the fastest it's ever been, I think that there's a lot to be said about the positivity of what he's brought to hardcore and the culture in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess like the reason I ask is, Sonny's been on the podcast before. And again, there was definitely in the early stages of me starting this project, I looked to him as far as a lot of inspiration and at least things to set a bit of a pace for myself. But if I'm being like completely honest, like I had to kind of have a moment where I was like, okay, Sonny and I might be doing very similar things, but we are two totally different creative individuals. So I don't need to essentially walk the same line that he might do that. So there's different ways that I've wanted to approach different things, despite, someone being like, oh, you're the Canadian Hate 56 or anything. It's like, that's a high compliment, thank you, but I'm also my own thing, and I'm also kind of doing that. But I guess the reason and the origin of this whole question is there are certain people that run certain fests, especially nowadays. They'll like reach out to people like Sonny or myself or Steven from 197 Media, and they don't really have much creative input. They're just like, you just do your thing. And I think I've seen it and I've experienced this myself, where there's certain no-brainer things for a fest to have a certain person film it, but there's some kind of weird, like, not scene drama per se, but there's certain things that those people don't enable that individual to actually do that thing for their scene. And it's kind of I would feel weird if there was anyone else filming This Is Hardcore and it wasn't Sonny per se. Like it was strange to watch some of the videos where, because I know that he went off for one of the nights this past summer when he was filming Rage Against the Machine, and that almost feels like the only situation where he might have to call in additional help to do so. But I guess from an outsider's perspective, again, it's just I've seen there is the initial like, hey, if you want to do this, that sounds great. Like, I'm happy to have you part of the team. But now, like you said, you guys are friends. Like, just correct the record if I'm wrong. Is he a part of any of the actual like fest preparations or discussions of anything, or is it just kind of like show up during the day and doing stuff like that, or do you involve him in any of that?
So there was a moment, I would say, I always hate it when I don't have the exact number. 2010, we were talking about a way to promote the fest more, and so we did something for 2011, This Is Hardcore. And then in 2011, going into 2012, because we shifted venues from the Starlight Ballroom to the Electric Factory, he and I then went ahead. Actually, it might have been, you know what? I'm going to go back one. In 2009, we did a video about the 2010 festival. In 2010, we did another video about 2011. And then for 2011, we knew we were changing in 2012. We did a whole ass movie together. And then in 13 and 14, even up to 15, we did a lot of promo videos and shit. And so he and I both have this kind of like funny, bad humor, like art kids who want to do stage comedy versus like theater kid kind of jokes that are really dumb and bad. And we convince a lot of our friends to do really stupid shit on camera to promote the fest. And I actually am mind blown that it's been a long time. And so many of these younger kids have never seen it because they came out so long ago. So in terms of, every once in a while I may kick his brain, and obviously we have a really big rapport with each other. So when he's at a fest, I'm immediately getting the field report. Who got a good set? Who was a bad set? Who was a pain in the ass? Like the pitfalls. And it's like a scorecard to keep along the way. And to touch on what you said, a lot of this stuff is copy and paste. A lot of these festivals, especially you fucking Canadians, just can't ever just get your own shit going. Got to take all the American bands. Now, I tease you, but at the same time, I think one of the hardest problems of a small fest, you got to start doing your own shit. You got to start regionally building more of your own bands into your festival if you want it to succeed. But most people are afraid to start out smaller and not have this giant thing, where a foundation that is strong and wide will build you a much stronger overall thing. We didn't start off with the biggest bands. I got very, very, very lucky that we had Terror and H2O at the first year of this hardcore. Very fucking lucky. Serendipitously, it just worked out. And obviously it plays in my relationships and their availability, but I find newer fests trying to jump out, hitting a home run, where your first fest, you just got to get on base. Get something that you're going to break even on. Get something that's going to bring people to say, oh shit, this is great. Obviously the Canadians have a fiscal advantage because you get money from the government to help fly people in and shit. But I think that in that way, new festivals pop up and they don't learn the little steps. Now there are great great promoters who just eventually over time go, yeah, I've been doing this long enough. I can do a fest. And a great example is Jimmy and Cliff and the Edgemen guys. Like they've been doing shows for years. The tie down last year was great, but this year was outstanding. Now they're doing a Coda's Life reunion. And them guys have now leveled up to the point where they can handle a 2,000 person fucking show.
Mm-hmm.
But your goal should never be at your first attempt to get 2,000 people. You don't need to. Get on base, build a name, make something good rapport so people trust you to take on, because you have the same chance of failing as you do succeeding your first year.
Totally.
And that's something that I think needs to be said. It doesn't, because the minute someone like me says that, people are, oh, he's just trying to gatekeep you. It's like, well, no, it's just that you can have all the money in the world and buy all the bands. But if no one really knows what the deal is, it takes a couple years. Believe it or not, people still, because of how long we've been around, people are like, this hardcore? Oh, I didn't even know about that thing. Like, so I pretend that no one knows what this hardcore is, and I flyer as much as I can. You know?
Oh, so you almost you almost play in a way of like, I'm curating this lineup not for the masses that know this is hardcore. I'm trying to curate the lineup, and maybe this is a multi-goal as far as the lineup curation goes. But like, I like the idea that you're saying of like, I'm trying to figure out this fest lineup for the people that don't know, so that when they see their favorite band,
I think you're misconstruing it.
Okay.
I do the fest that I think is going to be the most successful for the people that are involved in it and the culture. But I have to accept the fact that just as when I walk in public and talk to people, I never walk around going, you know who the fuck I am.
Sure.
You know,
okay.
Someone introduce themselves to me and say, hey, I'm Joe. And they go, I know. Well, I'm still letting you know that I don't assume that you know who I am.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm going to still flyer, and I'm going to still assume you don't know what This Is Hardcore is. So like Jess and I went up to Bain for the reunion show. We handed out 1,000 flyers, and people were like, hey, Joe. I'm like, hey, you know, come this. Oh, I already got tickets, or I didn't know about it. It's important to press upon people that maybe they don't know. Instead of walking around assuming everyone knows who you are for this little thing that you do in a very small microcosmic community in a world of billions, maybe just have a little bit of, you know, like sense to say, maybe nobody knows about this, so I better get my ass out there and flyer. And that's, I've done that since 1996, just flyer.
Okay.
If you know about the show, you got tickets, that's great. I'm still going to hand you a flyer.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the thing that comes with time, is you have to build up pyramidically, you know, a strong foundation and build your way up. You know, yeah, we work so hard now on Keystone Jam, which is in Reading, Pennsylvania, because we don't have something in the winter and we need something. We're working on a punk rock thing, punk oi, you know, hardcore thing in the February of this year, because we have so many contacts and stuff to do. Some of these bands might not fit exactly with the never ending games and, you know, the missing links of hardcore now. So, you know, me, Richie, and Chris, the Trinity, you know, we do a bunch of shows together and we want to do more things. And I don't go out there going, yeah, you know who the fuck I am, you should play my shit. No, I treat it like, hey, this is the first time I'm doing this, and we gotta be smart about it. And I think that that's the best example to give to people, is to do things because you want to see it succeed. Don't bite off more you can chew, and don't cool guy anybody. Assume that no one knows who you are, and work with them under the thing of confidence that, hey, I'm going to do this the right thing, and I'm going to treat you right. Don't promise people more than what you can actually see yourself realistically giving them.
So I think I want to talk a little bit, or transition to the current lineup that we're going to be seeing. I do want to bring up an interesting piece that I wanted to go deeper on, that you said on another podcast, where you were talking about you brought up the term nepotism bands.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've never heard that before, but I loved how you explained it, and I was curious because you were bringing up people were giving you grief because Scare was on it, and Mully's been on the show, you know, when he like.
You mean his name is Tyler Mullen?
Yes, exactly.
All right,
we say Tyler Mullen on the podcast, but
all right, so Tyler Mullen.
Yeah.
So to give you the short run of this, is that it is so easy to write something on the internet and some fucking dickhead tear it apart or try to besmirch the situation. Do you think Madball existed without Agnostic Front? And honestly, the person who wrote the comment probably didn't even realize that Freddie is the younger brother of Roger Murray, and that Freddie Madball actually sang in a young teenage years for Agnostic Front for a tour when Roger couldn't. These are things that are beyond their capacity to grasp, possibly. And it's something that needs to be said, is that I am from Philadelphia. I've lived here my entire life. I've booked shows my entire life here. The people local to our scene, just as I said in the interest of the previous conversation, going to build from what's local to us. Because if your local scene is not involved in your local festival, you're depending upon people from the outside to come to you. Now, over the years, Philadelphia has had ups and waves and downs. I mean, 1970, it could go through this whole crazy history. But what really comes down to it, the things that made This Is Hardcore consistently grow is that I am a promoter who works 12 months a year, 385 days a year. I work more than everybody else because I'm out here doing this on job sites. I'm thinking about shit every single night. This is what I do. My local scene, because we watered it, nurtured it, helped it grow, blossom with it. We're lucky to have what we have in Philadelphia. And it's not because the city, it's because of the Delawares, the counties in Pennsylvania, the South Jersey people, and the people that come even as far as like Dundalk County, Maryland, and all these other places will just come to a Philly show because of the quality of things that myself, Bob Wilson, R5 Production, everybody else has ever done in Philadelphia. It's not just in Joe Hardcore Alone's work. We're working off other people's shit as well. The foundation that we have grown comes from our local scene. So that's why the Bob Wilsons and his bands and the Agitators and all the years of all the different locals, you know, we created this spot. I call it the Bob Wilson spot. I asked him one year, what place do you want me to place Malice in the Palace? And he said, I want to play first on Friday. This is the old venue. And I was like, why the fuck would you want to play first on Friday? It's like everyone stands in line and they're the first band everyone sees and they get the craziest reaction. So every year on the first band of Friday, that became like the Philly spot. If you're the first band on Friday, that was, and it feels better at the Starlight, but we've continued it with, you know, into the Electric Factory now, Franklin Music Hall era.
Yeah.
But it would be impossible for me to continue the legacy of supporting the local bands that continue to make our local shows what they are without putting on Tyler, Xavier, other Tyler's band, Scarab, which is like a band. We just had them again in Incendiary, and they had one of the fucking craziest opening sets in recent memory, the same way they did the first time they played the church. Like, this is what you do when you're a local promoter. You support your local scene, and you put the you know, it's like a fucking game. You're going to put, you know, for you Canadians, you're going to put the guy who's going to put the puck in the net and on the ice as soon as you can.
Yes.
You know, it's the same.
You got to
thing.
put Gretzky out
Yeah,
first.
you're going to put the kid who you know, that guy's going to put the fucking puck in the net.
Right.
And that Tyler and this band Scarab is going to put the puck in the net 9 out of 10 times. No fucking question. Don't care if they don't care if they're brand new. Nepotism is something that I see in the Midwest and in the West Coast and in places where just because the band is associated with another band, the assumption is they're also going to be as good. And I don't think that's always possible. You know, just because you're, and I mean, you can even apply it to some older New York bands who now have newer bands. Just because you're in this older New York band, I mean, should the day come where I do another band beyond Punishment or Shadow Realm, I don't expect anybody to just assume this is going to be fucking good. Right. I want to go off our own merits because it takes a lot of time. But it behooves me to say this, that the internet is classless at times and just looking for something to shoot at and talk shit on.
Yeah.
Scarab is better to me in Philadelphia, then maybe they won't have the same reaction in Ontario. Maybe they wouldn't have the same reaction at LDB, but it's going to be on their fucking reaction. And This Is Hardcore this year. That LDB, Ontario, what's that one out in the middle of fucking nowhere, oil fields?
Calgary. That's where
Calgary.
I'm from.
Yeah, out in fucking Calgary. They're going to fucking kill it in Calgary because they killed it at This Is Hardcore.
Right.
So suck my dick about fucking nepotism.
Beautifully said. But I do agree that there is, I appreciate you bringing up the point of just because, I say this all the time, that just because someone played in a band that did really well, if they come out with a new band, there will be there might be more people who go to check it out based on who's in it. You know, maybe it's a bit of a
But yeah,
super
and you
group
got to
or
earn
whatever.
them. You have to earn them people to come a second time. Earn them people
the
to talk
second
about
time.
you.
Yeah, because they'll go check it out, but if it sucks ass, it'll be crickets long after that. So there have been people, unfortunately, who have tried to do the gambit of, people just check out Spencer's bands because, you know, he does scoped exposure, and it's like, well, the monthlies stay up, so it's not just because of that. There might be more people, and I'm grateful for anyone who wants to check out anything that I'm a part of, but like,
Name your favorite band that you do.
That I do?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not trying to plug my own shit in front of you, but I'll
put you on the spot now. What's your favorite?
Okay, well, I'll just say
your favorite.
My favorite that's like currently active is Admission of Guilt, which I think
are they the most popular, or are they your favorite?
Well, now it's opening up a whole can of worms. The other band's kind of in it.
I'm trying to.
I was just. You can. What's your daughter's name?
Kayla. She
follows us and fucks with our shit. So that's probably.
I don't know if that's the best reference. I don't know if that's the best. What I was gonna do is there's emotional shit that's attached to punishment.
Sure.
That made punishment something cool to do again 20 years, the 20 years since we did, and there's something emotional and exciting that comes from now that this is next year will be 20 years since I started singing for Shattered Realm.
Mm-hmm.
That makes that fun. Yet I know that I perform songs that I didn't have a hand in writing in, but at the same time, I also know I was there in the pit when that band started, and we played so many shows together, and I was still an integral part of the band's growth, that I feel excited, still doing that. You're always going to have projects, I think, that people will say, oh, well, because he did this, it's easier. Nothing is easy in doing anything creative, because you're allowing people to have their own choice, whether they think it's good or not. And then you have to weigh against, do I do this because I like this, or do I do this because people like it enough that I feel validated? And the people that give up doing things often don't get the validation that they need to continue to be creative. It's the crazy assholes in this fucking world, whether you want to go as far back as a Philly band like Starkweather, who fucking changed history with the way they did metalcore, that even bands like Converge and bands to this day rip off. They didn't give a fuck who validated them. They were validated by creation. And that's really when you start separating popularity and the people that chase popularity through bands, or people who are just creative monsters who will, in the case of Code Orange, they release a record and that crazy pandemic video. And just like I said, when I got made fun of, there were some people, shooting some shots and running their mouth. And all of a sudden, these other bands, now they're a little more gothy. Now they're dressing a little more goofy. And you're like, right. Now you're starting to pick up what Code Orange put down. The key to doing anything is to do it because you get what you want out of it. And if someone's going to come at you and say, well, because you have this, you're able to do this, shut the fuck up and do your own thing. And if your own thing grows on its own merit, that's what's important. Worrying about who's doing what across the street or around the corner is fucking fruitless. You have to work on your own shit. You can measure and understand. It's like, quote unquote, we call market research. It is important to know what new stuff is getting out there, because my job is to make sure that if we're going to pay someone a certain amount of dollars, that they're worth those dollars. And it's interesting to see what bands are popular and what bands aren't. So it's important to see where the popularity is going, but I'm still going to put on my friends' bands locally, and I'm still going to serve the local area, because that is what has always made our scene strong, is making sure our local scenes our local bands are front and present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you were mentioning that Philly spot, and I think they're not a Philly band, but I think you had, actually, I don't know if I should bring that up, because
why?
Well, I
like bringing up anything you're not supposed to bring up.
Well, I don't know if I'm not supposed to bring up, but I think I had heard that, or I think when I was seeing the Day by Days, I think You're the Knife was going to be one of the opening bands of one of the days.
Yes.
But now I don't know with
it is it's a weird thing to speak on, but I'm not
Mhm.
afraid to say it because, Maddie's another person who is really close to me.
Right.
Physically, I'm not able to tell you what the end result of what's going to happen with her. I can tell you that she is versus what the initial thought was. It sounds like she's going to come out of this better than anyone's initial impact. Like when you hear, oh my God, she's going to come out of this better. But we're adults here. There's no physical way. I mean, with the exception of Brandon, who could probably, I mean, maybe he could play with the backing. Maybe he could play with backing, like computer music. The entire band has broken. Like everybody in the band
Yeah.
besides Brandon has broken legs.
Right.
Are
Yeah,
we
it's
gonna
just a
are we gonna
mess.
sit them? Are we gonna sit them in stools? Like how are we gonna? They're not gonna play. And it's not because, well, Joe, you're mad for pulling them. I'm not pulling them. They're not physically gonna be able to stand up in a month
Right.
through a set. And you know what? They've played this hardcores and they'll play Philly shows. So and this isn't something that like groundbreaking news. You're the Knife isn't playing the fest. It's like it should be fucking obvious when a band's in a crazy car accident
Right.
and lucky to be breathing. And the Lord has given them enough providence to protect them so they didn't end up on the wrong side of this dirt. They'll play again, but it's a going conclusion that if they said to me, I still want to do it, I'd say, no, don't push yourself.
Right.
And knowing Madison's current condition and where she's still in a place where they're still deciding the end result of how much damage is to her. And again, her brain's going to be fine. She's going to heal, but sometimes they don't know the extent of injuries yet to say this is the final decision. So I can't speak on that,
Mhm.
but I'll tell you right now, it's a foregone conclusion that they will not be able to play the fest.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think that like came up and then
No, don't be. There's nothing.
formulating.
Listen, there's nothing. No, there's nothing. You did nothing disrespectful to them.
No. Yeah, like Madison
like
came on the podcast only a few months ago and talked a lot about her transition into the vocals and all that. But so many people listening to this podcast alone have been thinking about that band and but
Listen,
we've seen it so many times. So many bands have been able to turn it around.
I made this joke to Sonny. If she was cut in half in it, which she's not, she's not. Sonny and her would figure out a way to build some spider legs, like something out of Wild Wild West, and this bitch would still be around. She is one of the most innovative, talented, dedicated humans I've ever met in this world. And just saying it's choking me up. There's no chance of her ever giving up. And that's all I can say about it. And she's the kind of person that will understand and already, she's not even talking right now, but she's healthy. There's no one that's going to be able to understand it better. Like, yeah, we're not able to play, give the spot to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. What's just because we're on that topic, and I didn't have this prepared, but like when you run into certain situations like that, where it's a band needs to drop for like, kind of like a reason that's not just like, oh, we're just a disorganized hardcore band. Like when there's a situation like that, like, are you like immediately like, we're going to put you on for next year? Or are you going to like keep that in your back pocket for when you start planning the years to come? Like, do you always try to like connect the dots or like dot the T's and I's of the things that just maybe weren't in the cards for a specific year? Or do you is it case by case?
A lot of times what happens is you plan for something, but you have to, again, from Jocko, you have to make iterative small decisions. If you make a long-term plan, let's say I booked the entire lineup in September, that thing's going to fall through by December. By January, half the bands are not going to be committal because their tour manager, their managers and booking agents are going to have something different to happen. So when you book something like this, just in the booking process, you have to make small iterative decisions. I used to make one of the biggest mistakes I used to make was booking too many bands and not having the space when good things came around. So
can you break that down a little bit?
Well, you have X amount of days, X amount of slots. And, if you look at this is hardcore number 3 right here, I got this is hardcore from 2012. I got this is hardcore from 2000 and this is 2008 because it's got Suicide File on it. Or actually 2009, it's got Suicide File on it. you have to leave space for developments. You should work on the fest to the best of your ability. It's harder now for me to really get a sense of who could truly headline. And those headlining days, headlining bands take the most amount of time because they're dickheads. Truly, they have the most amount of space for maneuverability. They don't know what their tour plans are. And then they have like 2 layers between them. They have an agent, a manager who have their own ideas. And so, it used to be argumentatively every day of the year, something This Is Hardcore happens, especially with the social media now with Jess and Chris and all the people involved in This Is Hardcore. We're going to slowly push this further. So again, every year it gets a little bit easier and a little bit easier, and it has because you have a foundation to build upon. But I can no longer book 20 fucking bands 3 days after the fest because their entire shit could change. And that's kind of where I'm at. So Year of the Knife will not play the Friday of This Is Hardcore. Year of the Knife will play the next time that they're physically available and that they're able to do it. Like if they have tour plans to take them to Europe or they've got shit going on, I can't subscribe to that. I do always keep X amount of slots open, hoping to get certain things happening. And that allows me that maneuverability to being flexible so I don't get pinned down. Usually what happens the hardest time of the year is not having space when a band sees the lineup and it becomes available, or someone goes, "Hey, I thought that we could make it happen. Now we can." And you're like, "Fuck, that's what happened with Throwdown this year."
Okay.
Like we were hoping to get them, but we couldn't make the ball happen a couple years ago. And now that they're available, we moved mountains because I want them there. Sometimes you do have to break into your own formed, completely solid plans for the right people. It's not often, but you do it. Especially I'm questioning this year because there's always a band that ends up dropping off. I think last year we may have gotten lucky and no one dropped off, but it's usually pretty regular for a band to not play. So this Year of the Knife thing isn't like, oh my God, what do we do? We never had this. Now every fucking year there's bands that can't play.
Right.
And this.
Do you remember the first time when you were doing the fest that you had a band drop? Were you like
depression
panic
right
mode?
here, boom. Actually, I don't have that flyer on the wall. I don't have that one on the wall. We took it off because we're mass producing it.
Right.
Yeah, depression. They're from Atlanta. They used to be dudes with Love Is Red, and Hunter and them guys were like, "Hey, sorry guys, we're not going to be able to play." Oh well, get somebody else
Oh, so you weren't even phased.
off the bench. No factor. You have to. The hardest pull-offs. I can speak with this pretty honestly. There was the band Blast, B''Last.
Oh.
And the initial offer was, hey, my friend Dano, who's really good in New York and does a ton of shit. He was a stage manager at the time. He was affording them the opportunity to do 3 shows, Boston, New York, and Philadelphia. He would have tour managed and provided gear in a van, and the total cost would have been all put into one offer. And then they got a booking agent, and that guy was like, "Nah, they're just going to handle every show individually." Okay, cool. Here's your offer for This Hardcore show. 3 weeks out from the show, hey, we need our deposit. Well, the money they were getting wasn't going to count, maybe we'll pay for flights. So I was like, well, what's going on? They didn't get their, they got to get their flights covered. I said, well, look, they're only getting this amount of money. And they said, well, if we don't get their deposit, we're not coming. I said, well, you can't buy flights. You can't buy a single flight with the deposit money. Sounds like they're pulling off. I'm not giving them money and then needing to, owe them a show where they pay for X amount less because they took the deposit. Mm-hmm. If they're not committing to the show, they're not playing. And they're like, fine, we're not playing. And I was happy because I went ahead and I called my friend Craig Silverman. And he told me the Agnostic Front was practicing that weekend. So I called Roger on the phone. I said, Roger, I need you, brother. And he was like, all right, you got to give me a flight. I'm like, done deal. Flight, we'll hook you up with money. Don't worry about it. They played in New York. They practiced in New York. He played Philadelphia. And it was the first time him and Jack Kelly from Slapshot hung out and talked in so many years. And actually, it was a really cool This Hardcore memory. Early on Friday, Jack from Slapshot, Vinny Stigma, and Roger, all old dudes who grew up together in the original first era of, hardcore as we know it. They all were like, hey, where's some coffee? I'm like, well, we got this room over here. We'll get you coffee. And I told him, no, let no one else in. Let them three old guys sit back and talk. It was the first time as friends they talked in over a decade.
Mm.
And that was serendipitous. But what your job is as a promoter is to be fluid. And I used to not be as good with this. And there isn't a way I can say this more than if you want to think of someone going, motherfuck, fuck you, this is fucking stupid. Yeah, I used to do all that. I tried so hard to live up to Jocko's no factor, but there's so many times it's like, fuck you. I feel like it's so bad. But you still got to make the change. It hurts me to say, hey, Year of the Knife isn't playing. But that was a foregone conclusion the minute I heard the damage done.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone in a band's going to play, and hopefully that they live up to what's expected of them to fill a spot like that. And that's the end of it.
Okay, so going to the lineup, I'm a big fan of the underdogs when it comes to that. So, obviously, like, if we really wanted to go band to band, we should have started that from the very beginning of the episode. But, for the listeners, I want you to give 3 of the severely like underrated bands that you encourage people going to This Is Hardcore, or people who are just looking at the lineup and considering buying tickets to just like pay way more attention to. Who are like the 3 bands that you believe in the most that are not being properly recognized?
Wreckage. And the same thing about Wreckage can be said about Combust and Dead Last, is that they are 1000% pure, raw, unadulterated fucking hardcore. And because there's no chuggas and none of those metal attached things, and they don't get the big spots in festivals, and they're not even really trying to be those kind of bands, that I think if you wanted to get something really under your like report card for This Is Hardcore, it's following the chain of bands that aren't out there with booking agents with metallic sounds, because that's always going to be a basis for This Is Hardcore and hardcore in general. So, and that applies, I can say it real quick, that applies to Wreckage, it applies to Risk, Statement of Pride, it applies to fucking Regulate still, who still do everything on their fucking own.
Mm-hmm.
It applies to all the lower bands like the Fool's Game, the Risk, the Hold My Owns, the Face Rex, the Combust, like this pure unadulterated hardcore style before you get into the metal, where it's like, it sounds hardcore, but it also is kind of metal. And they're the kind of bands that aren't really looking to end up on some Ozfest behind a 20,000 person barricade, where they just want to get in front of people and play pure unadulterated hardcore. Those are the first people that I'm going to say, make sure you take the time to watch, because those are the bands that now stand out. Now with so many bands having a gimmick, doing the metal thing, the social media thing, make sure they wear certain clothes when they get on stage. Those bands already exist out there, and they're playing this fest, no question of that. But give your eye on the band that just playing that fucking raw, unadulterated, pure fucking hardcore. I think that those bands are the best ones that serve you for that.
Cool. Yeah, those are 3 great picks. I'm going to be able to see Combust in September up here in Toronto, which I'm very excited about. On the topic of like reunion sets or bands that are coming just out of the woodwork to be able to come back, and this is partially a selfish question, if I'm being completely honest, just because Scoped is like, we're Western Canada based, and there have been times when we do an anniversary show, like kind of every year. And this year we're not doing anything, but there was a couple ideas that I had brewing when there's like specific, anniversaries of like different records that were like super apparent. When you're approaching these bands with doing, a one-off set for This Is Hardcore, is there a best practice that you try to follow, or is it 9 times out of 10 people are like, Joe, for you, anything, brother? Like, is there anything when you have a crazy idea that you're proposing to someone, or is it the opposite? Are they proposing that idea to you?
I would say it's 25-75. It's 25.
Okay.
It's 25% of the time
people come to you versus you go to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I hear things happening, and because of the growth of festivals, it's allowed different people to come into the space and take on doing stuff that I may have done. you know, I orchestrated the Bulldoze thing completely so that way Bob Wilson would have first shot at them for FYA. And then after his on sale did so good, we announced them for Keystone. And then it was like, cool, now we'll have Bulldoze and they'll be able to play and they won't have the stress of that. And they were a part of it. There's things like that. And then like with the Bane show, I heard from a band that said no because they had members playing in other bands. They're like, yeah, dude, we're playing this Bane show. And I was like, what the fuck? And then I had a call also to be like, hey, come on, what happened? What happened? Because like, what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And even the Bane thing wasn't guaranteed. And those are my people, you know, like, I mean, it worked out, obviously, but, you know, there's not always going to be a guarantee that anyone has to play for me or This Is Hardcore first, or if at all.
Of course.
And, you know, a funny example is, you know, you look, for me, I look at like what other fests are happening. So, unfortunately, John from Headstrong passed, so that brought Prayer for Cleansing and Undying into the fold of performing again. And then obviously because of them playing Furnace Fest, it was like, you know, if they're playing that, there's no way they shouldn't play This Hardcore. And those guys are, I mean, we actually played with Prayer in Gino A. Marcus. And we've been homies with Undying back in the day. So it was cool to have them be a part of it, but that wasn't a guarantee thing. Like Prayer came along pretty easy and they were pretty no factor, which is awesome. But, you know, it took a little time to make sure all these little things come together. But I would say the ones that fall in your lap are like through contacts of other people. Very rarely recently has someone come with a slam dunk. Like to me, Silent Majority from Long Island is a slam dunk. Mm-hmm. And that was, hey, would you ever think about having them? I'm like, I think about it all the time, but they're a Long Island only band. I don't think they'd ever play outside the island for something like this. And they're like, no, they'll do it because it's Grill Biscuits. And I'm like, really? Well, fuck yeah, let's do it. I don't care what it costs. We're having it happen. You know, like they were on a short list of bands I always hope to have play. Actually, speaking of it, same thing for Beyond Repair from Throwdown. You know, like those were our guys. We met them in August of 1999. Dysphoria's on tour, we're roadies, and they're on their first U.S. tour. Stay at my mom's house. We were fucking homies since then. A couple years back, was trying to talk to them about doing something very similar to this. The issue being Throwdown is owned by Dave, who was in the band later on, and he's the singer. So he wasn't really great with the idea of them doing a Throwdown set since he owns a name for all the obvious reasons. So they were kind of like, it's iffy if we can do it under Throwdown. I was like, we'll just do it for fun. And then with them celebrating Mandel's 30 years of Indecision Records, them creating Beyond Repair to do that, it was like, come on, guys, you got to play this. And they were like, fuck yeah, of course we're going to play it. So we shoved them on with Bane just because it's like, come on, guys. Like, you know, I don't know. The hardest thing about a reunion is if a band doesn't do it in the right order, not the right order for them, the right order for us, by the time they come around to This Is Hardcore, they might still need an amount of money that I don't know if we still have the same value for them. And that's the only real intrinsic point of trying to get the reunion first is you have the responsibility, obviously, of paying them accordingly to a real reunion price, but then you don't have the same gamble of evaluation that could go down because they played 4 or 5 other things before they've gotten around to play. And I mean, that's just on the fiscal side of things. It's not like, oh yeah, well, people won't like you as much. No, the band who has a reunion that people are really excited about, they're always going to have value. But when it comes down to physical dollars and cents, there is a numeric value placed upon it. So you always want to be, it's not, sometimes it is, you have to be Talladega Nights where you want to be first or you don't want to be last. But other times it's like, well, how many shows can this band play before they really have to understand they can't play last and they probably can't get the kind of money they got the first 2 or 3 times. And that's some of the hardest conversations to have doing this thing is like a band who's been doing well and expecting like, well, we can do it again. It's like, yeah, but if the first time you don't do it again, well, then we're out lots of money. So let's keep our friendship and not deal with that. And I've had that conversation a couple of times like, hey, you want to headline the church? You want to do 2 shows? Let's fucking go. But I don't think that you're able to headline and bring the kind of money you're asking. And that's an honest thing. And I've done that and it's always hard and it's broken some relations and those things kind of come with, that's the territory of making sure that at the end of the day, This Is Hardcore will continue. We've never stopped. I mean, the pandemic stopped us. literally they stopped us. I was going to do one in 2020 in a fucking parking lot, and then dumb shit happened. And then 2021, when we did the first show back with You're the Knife as their first, the record release and the first show back in the Philly area.
Right.
Bob did a show a week later, and it was insane. I'm like, we got to get in this hardcore together. And we couldn't pull it together because we couldn't get a room that we thought would be sizable enough in the city area to make it happen. So I had to step out for 2 years. So as much as yes, literally we didn't do it, but I was trying the whole time in 20 and 21 to do a show. Mm-hmm. So I think that these are the things that come into play. There's not always going to be a year. And we've had years where we didn't have reunions and people are like, oh, we didn't have a reunion. But it was also the same thing as, well, you're always looking for the reunion. No, I'm looking for what is going to make sense to play last, that people will stay for. And the amount of money that I have to pay you for is equitable to the amount of people that are paying to see you.
Mm-hmm. What's best for the fest?
It's best for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I should, but I never do it. But there's a ton of bands that are just, I don't like the word adjacent, but like they're full more of the metallic stuff or the pop stuff, that they see other bands like them succeeding at the fest, and their agents and people have reached out and said, hey, you did good with Save the Day. How about these guys? And it's like, yeah, that was Save the Day. It's not you. You have to have that conversation.
Right.
It's got to make sense. And every band stands on their own 2 feet in that regard. Not two bands are very similar in what their value is or what they can draw. So it's always on a band-to-band case, especially in the upper bands.
Yeah, I think it's always been really cool to see the wild cards that I've seen you do for years over. Like I was really I'm a big Kublai Khan fan, and when they were announced as a special guest, like I was imagining when it was like secret guest, I'm imagining some bigger band or something like that. So when I saw that was like the addition that you were doing, and you were kind of hyping it up a little bit more than you just like dropping them out of nowhere, I thought that was very, very smart. And for what I saw from like the footage, they really did. Like I feel like they can win over any crowd that they're playing to. I think that they are an incredibly talented group of dudes. But yeah, I think it's always been interesting where you do one reunion and then you have this weird reputation, and then you don't do it 1 year just because maybe the stars don't align, and then people think, oh, you're not doing this. You're like just let me book the fest, man. Come on.
I'll give you. I would like to say that Kublai Khan is probably going to be the band that continues to grow the most out of these bands. And there's bands on the bill that I think that they're going to supersede within a year or so. I think that they connect with a large audience beyond just hardcore. And I seen them when Chris did them way back, and it wasn't like, oh, these guys suck, but I didn't really get the whole thing. It wasn't until we did them in August of 2021. And actually what we did there was so interesting, because Matt's such a humble guy. He was asking me how many people were playing tonight. I'm like, well, you're at least at this. And he was like, this is the biggest headliner show we've ever played. So there was a short moment where post-pandemic, where the Philly hardcore show that they played was the biggest show they ever headlined.
Wow. And
they were affable, super easy to work with. And regardless of what the music could sound like to some people, they acted in a way that was so akin to hardcore kids. And I feel like Matt is a pure hardcore kid regardless, that it made sense. And when we all started talking with the, booking agents and managers, I'm like, this is a done deal. They got to play. And in fact, one of the major reasons why they weren't initially announced was they were the support for a Terror show. And Terror was already playing the First Unitarian Church. And we had Pain of Truth, so we kind of were like, we can't drop the ball about Kublai Khan yet. Like, we got to hold off. And it worked out, because that second punch gave us so much like, holy shit. And honestly, I mean, yeah, it was another Canadian band, or they're not Canadian, they're the American side, Misery Signals guys. It was like Kublai Khan, Misery Signals, and then the Canadians Comeback Kid. And dude, Kublai Khan had a wild fucking set. Like I was on there going, this is going to be hard to top. And I think in the year or two to come, they're going to be the band that you're going to either have to play under, or you're going to have a hard time stopping them. As for the reunion thing, yeah, it came early. It came early. It was something easy to do. You got to figure, just in general, like The biggest reunion I had at one point that got to 5 figures was Sheer Terror. And they were one of my favorite bands. So of course that was easy and it was equitable. But then it started getting like out of control to the point where a band in the last couple of years were like, I heard you paid this much, this is what we want. I'm like, that's them, it's not you.
Right.
Everybody pays for reunions and everybody pays, and everybody being all the festivals bigger than I. Like if you look at the Riot Fests and all that stuff, there's tons of bands that do the Misfits reunion, like all this stuff. That's what makes people do festivals around. So it's always good to have that. It's not the necessity. The problem is when you don't have a reunion band, when you've got like a working band, a lot of these guys don't want a headline. Oh, you should get someone bigger. Well, who the fuck is bigger? You're like,
Sure.
the fuck? I got the money for you. Why are you telling me to give this money to someone else? I want you to fucking play.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the ball busting side of things. It gets old when you're like, your band does this amount of tickets. People like you. Why don't you want to take this money? Because no one wants to play last.
So this is the last section or subject that I wanted to cover with you, Joe. And it's funny because a lot of the videos that, I'll see Sonny post a clip from like a church show or anything. If it's a show that you're booking, 9 times out of 10, you are directly across from where Sonny is standing. So unintentionally,
It's a rule. I don't want him standing near me.
Oh, okay.
I get in the way of a cut. He gets mad at me. We're like two brothers. Like,
I
get
see.
the fuck away from
Don't ruin my shot. Yeah.
Yeah, like literally, he knows when I'm operating. Stay the fuck on your side, motherfucker.
Yeah, but it is funny because even if he's like panning to the crowd or panning to the band or whatever's happening, I think I've always been infatuated by your reaction to things. And you've said on other podcasts and yourself that sometimes you're doing crowd control, but I almost think that you're a mosh manager. I would like to introduce, because you've talked to other people even like, off of when bands are doing like, hey man, like you're moshing way too hard for like the third band of this 12 band fest. Like maybe like save it for the end versus spin kicking someone in the back of the neck for band 3. But it's been super interesting because I think there's a lot of people who are just getting into this shit who have no idea who you are, and they're like, who is this grandpa who's just like killing the vibe of like
I'm not grandpa because of this beard. Fuck.
Yeah, but it is funny to see like to hear you speak about like, I'm not just trying to like not make sure someone's having fun. I'm actually trying to make sure that these kids aren't just like breaking their necks and then they're not coming to hardcore ever again. So it's been like, is there anything like what goes through your like, is it so hard for you not to enjoy it, or is it just different because you're thinking of different things when you're
enjoy what?
in that to just enjoy the show?
So is that you assuming because I'm up there, I'm not enjoying it?
I'm not assuming that, but I do think that there is a bit of like I've read that on some comments of some of Sonny's videos where it's like, Joe just seems like he's having the worst time. Like, I don't think he's having the worst time, but I think he might be a little stressed.
I'm like, look, man, I'm gonna say the same shit I've been saying. I pour fucking concrete for a living. You know, that's hard work. There was a time when I was a young, foolish man, and I didn't take liberties. I really never tried to hit somebody very small, but I always danced at the hardest level possible when I was at full go. And sometimes there was casualties of that scenario. When everything relies on you walking out of that room knowing nobody got themselves physically harmed to the point where they couldn't walk out, you start having to reacting. And when responsibility, at the end of the day, the pyramid of responsibility, at the end of the day, it's me at the top. I'm the one who contacted church. I'm the one who contacted the bands. I'm the one who pays all the bands. I'm the one who's in charge of making sure everybody who walked in the room walks out in mostly the same order. And that's something that's, really impressed upon me, especially in the last 10 years, definitely in the last 15, but definitely in the last 10, is the importance of saying to the people that are doing the mosh tactics of taking liberties and hitting small people, It is too. Sorry, Richie Crutch keeps fucking trying to break my balls and calling me this motherfucker. Anyway, you know, you have a responsibility, and sometimes that puts you in the rock and a hard spot of telling the band guy, I don't care what you want. This person's not standing up here because we need to make sure this stage is policed. One of the small aspects that's not seen is that the two PA systems, the speakers themselves, are strapped down with truck straps to a small baker scaffold that doesn't really have anything to keep it from tipping. The next thing is that the stage front has these little handmade benches by John Hiltz, who is a New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York overall hardcore fucking legend. And he built these things so these PA things stand on there. There are so many small little fucking holes on there that what happens is people could easily fall in their feet and break their knee or ankle. Like it's almost like a torture device if you step in it wrong. So before I was always booking shows, I was working security at the venue for Sean R5 and Agnew and R5 Productions. So I would work stage security. That's when I was frustrated, you know. But when I was no longer just the dickhead security guy and started, I mean, I remember I was like 24, 25. Then I realized the importance of everybody going home happy and safe is more important than allowing somebody to do something reckless and things like jumping off the top of the PA, stuff like kicking people directly in the fucking face from stage diving. You know, like the causality is that the church could get sued and then we can never have shows again. And done enough to make sure the church has got sued for years. And Sean, God bless him. I don't know why he stuck with me, and it's a blessing that he did. But, you know, we did enough harm and enough chaos that it was a time to start putting things back in the community, as I talked about earlier. So, yeah, if I have to stand up there and laugh and throw people off stage and get frustrated, like, come on, kid. It's always like, come on, man, do the right thing. Actually, at the time I'm bummed, I see band stage dives. And it's like, my kids, like, come on, lift your fucking feet. Jump over there. It's an 18-inch triangle. Jump over it. You know, it's not me. Oh, I hate that I have to do that. I go to work and I do my thing. I come home, sometimes I go right to the show, get the show ready, then go home and shower and come back. And I'm just excited. And then, yeah, in the process, it's like, oh, you know, like you're worried about this. I don't want anybody walking out of that room hurt because I didn't say something to someone. I didn't stop something.
Right.
You know, that's a reality. And so, you know, I guess the way you would visualize my face may show an expression that doesn't seem like I'm happy. I crack up. And then, yeah, there is kind of like, are you that fucking stupid? Like a friend of ours, a friend of mine's daughter's on stage. She's a good stage diver, but GB, she was fucking terrible. I was like, dude, you fucking suck. You better step your fucking shit up. So when they played Atlantic City, she came to me, did I do better? I'm like, yeah, you did a lot fucking better. Like, come on, step your game up. That's the most of it. But, you know, from not seeing on those angles is you step in the wrong way and your whole knee and, you know, you're tearing an ACL. And a lot of these kids don't have insurance. And then it falls back on us. And then there's people that try to pull on the PA. You'll see me smack someone's hand, like, stop grabbing it. Stop grabbing it. You know, there's a lot of little things that the small little incidental, oh, I don't want to tell anybody what to do. And then next thing you know, we're getting sued. That ends the whole game. So if someone's got to stand in here and I'm not some big bad fuck you, I do my best to not kick anybody out. We have a very small kick out ratio, especially in the last couple of years. We have hardly any real fights. Everything, you know, I have so much experience at these shows. The people who work the shows on the floor, these are the people that also play shows. Cody, Zach, these other, you know, Eric Walk. These are the guys on the floor that have been going to shows and in the pit. They know when a fight's about to happen. They know the difference. I don't just hire goons and just choke people out. Black Dennis, the scariest person in Philadelphia, who several times as a child, he was moshing and his gun fell out of his pants and everyone's like, ah! Like, Big Dennis is the man. He's on the floor. Like, these guys have been doing this so long. They know when there's a fight, and they know where we just tell the kid, hey, simmer down. You're a little bit you're going hard. And we were telling them, like, it's not you, it's them. They're just not ready. They can't keep up with you. These are big monster fucking size guys. And the minute they get told, they're not like, fuck you, kid. They're like, oh shit, my bad, guy. Sorry. Want to respect the place. It's just to keep respect. And if someone on the YouTube comment, I don't read I haven't stopped reading comments since 2016. So 7 years of not ever reading the comments on anything. I don't know what they say. I can just tell you it comes from a place of wanting to see everybody go home. And I'll tell you one story of why not. And we did this turnstile show at the church. It was last time they played the First Unitarian Church. Some kid was hurt. I get off the stage, and a bunch of people told me he's so hurt, you can't touch him. This church, obviously, we go over the fire capacity. Not allowed to really say that, but we're over the capacity. So, okay, I got to get a fire company down here to bring this kid outside because you three idiots are telling me that this kid can't be brought outside. For people who don't know, the First Unitarian Church is in a basement. It's all concrete steps, 1 story. So you have 4 steps to come up and then a story of steps. Okay, I've got to get people in here to get this kid out. Whole show's over. What do you mean whole show's over? Well, this one guy doesn't want to let me do what we do all the time, which bring the kid outside so he can get help. Show's over. Lights on. This turnstile bummed out. I was bummed out. And everyone's like, Joe, you're being a dick. I'm like, no, everyone has to get out. What do you mean? Well, now I have to have the fire people come down, and they're not going to like how many people are in the room. So because you don't want to let me do what I've been doing all this time, whole show's over. And it sucks to do that. I wasn't fucking happy. I didn't go home and go, you should have seen me. I'm so fucking cool. No, it was the last time this band, which is now giant, could play the First Unitarian Church. And it ended on a sour note by 3 dickheads who thought they knew better because some kid got drunk and passed out. And they told me, his neck's could be broken. It's like, dude, fuck this. So there's reasons why I do what I do.
Yeah. It's not coming from a place of just being like, the kids can't have fun. It's like, no, I know how to have fun.
I'm the ones who cry. Dude, if we could I want the kids to have the most fun. If I could build my own venue, we'd put fucking foam on the walls. You could jump off of whatever. Like, this is a venue. This is a venue that was founded 30 years ago by the Cabbage Collective. Later on, R5, Robbie Red Cheeks, and other promoters would do shows there. You know, I got lucky from 2004 onwards. Sean would iteratively allow me to book certain shows. And then finally, all right, Joe, this show's yours. You know, like you could do your own shows here. You know, like there's something that was passed down to me and us, R5, Dave Kiss still do shows. We all 3 of us do shows. We all do different shows there. I have a responsibility that show, at the end of the night, that show goes back in the same place it was when we found it. So the next people can use it and the community continue to have a place as important as that.
I love the idea of having a more spelunking-esque hardcore venue of some kind.
Yeah, like please give me the space. Just like, you know, let me go to Canada. You guys aren't even using the fucking money right. You're flying all these dumb American bands up.
Yeah, and we have the Canadian money to prove for that too. So
your healthcare is garbage. I broke my hand. I got the union insurance. $25 later, I'm set. I'd be waiting 7 weeks, 8 weeks before my hands even get looked at.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. If I had the money though, Canadian wise, I would do something crazy. I think we're very blessed for what we have and the heritage and the years of doing shows at the church. Lends its own power that bands will go, you know, like not that Knock Loose isn't a huge band, but they chose their first pandemic shows to do back to back at the First Unitarian Church. Now, possibly because of some of the clubs that are big enough for them weren't open for that, but they could have still waited. But they said, no, we want to do 2 shows back to back.
Yeah. And I want to play on the foam mats.
Yeah, there are bands that still want that legacy of being able to say they play it. So we're lucky that we have it in our backyard, and it goes back to the nepotism thing. Why would we not use it?
Totally. Okay. You mentioned people not stage diving correctly. So I want you to address the people that might be coming to This Is Hardcore for the very first time, the people that might have gotten to hardcore post-pandemic-esque. What are the 3 mosh advice pieces that you would like to share for what you would like to see wise?
Aesthetically, a great stage dive comes with not only a height achieved, but just this like almost like organic, like the greatest example is X Marty Williams X of Agitator. The kid is a monster. He's just built for stage diving, like a fucking salmon going up the river. He's so fucking good. Just he immediately can launch himself. He lands well, and he clears the first 2 or 3 people. That's such an important thing. You see people stage dive. How do you not be able to lift your head 2 feet, your feet 2 feet in the air and go over someone? Like there's people that do not have the inertia of running enough, or they just try to do the stand back and fall back. And luckily we do something different with this PA speakers and everybody else. Our speakers, after many, many years, are actually up in the lights. so you can hear it without, because for years we were trashing monitors and trashing cords and all this shit. I think number one thing of etiquette is don't touch the fucking band members. Don't run behind the fucking bass player. Stop grabbing the singer behind the fucking head and pulling them. Do you know how many singers don't want to be pulled forward? Do you know how many times like you actually?
I would say 9 out of 10.
No, I'll poke. I'm so glad people are fucking scared. I'd fucking poke you in the fucking eye. You do that to me at this hardcore. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, like, you know, I don't want someone pulling the back of my neck if I'm leaning, especially when the band's leaning down. You have the kid who's like jumping, and you know it looks like an epic picture. But if you pull that person into the end, like the guy from Incendiary got his arm broke. God bless Brendan from finishing the set in LA. But these things happen. I think no contact with any member is number one. If you lose all stars the minute you contact them, you knock a bass over, you trip over something, then jump over the person. Just if you don't have a way to dive. Also, yeah, there's a time when there's not enough people even worth diving. Don't do it. And then like mosh etiquette is, if you're a big guy, you see someone in front of you, unless you're moshing with your eyes closed, which I know you're not, don't take liberties. You know, think about what you're doing. And this is like the thing. Like, I can say, because I'm a fucking son of a bitch, when I was younger, I didn't give a fuck. There it is. Sorry. Didn't give a fuck. If you didn't like it, we would fight. Winner would be the right person. That was 20-something years ago. When I dance now, I don't want to hit any. If it happens, I'm like, oh, that sucks. I don't try. I might try to kick one of my friends. That's kind of fun, but I don't go full all in. But I see too many kids openly, and I know when they're looking. I know when they look around and they see who's okay for me to hit and who's going to beat me up. I don't like that. And I don't like it for one reason. If you're going to be a maniac, dude, there's plenty of maniacs. I was one of them. There's still fucking maniacs out there. Who they get on the thing, they're like a wrecking machine. But I don't like the targeting. I've never been a fan of being a bully. I don't think it's cool. Now, if you're moshing and you're like 5'6" and there's a bunch of goons out there, you want to swim with the sharks. It's not going to be good for you. And that's just the way it has to be. You know, you gotta get the wild card dudes get it out there. And if you want to get out there, don't come crying, because that shit's going to hurt, because these people are fucking big. They're strong. But I hate the liberties. I hate when there's not really a lot going on and there's plenty of space to avoid a scenario. And I feel in my heart, like, you saw that and you still wanted to do that to that kid.
Right.
It sucks, but it is what it is. You know, this is part of the other half of the person moshing have to have the kind of, oh shit, who's behind me, that kind of deal. And that gets a little
spidey
messy.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, younger kids who come to big fest, like I always say, This Is Hardcore is not everybody's show. And the reason why it's not everybody's show is you might be from fucking goofy ass Calgary where there's like 5 kids and a cow at the show.
You're gonna hit me with goofy ass Calgary?
Listen, you know what I mean? Like how big's the stage at a local Calgary show? How tall?
It's how tall?
Yeah.
For the venues that do have a stage, I would say like I'm 6 foot, so like chest.
Yeah.
That's
so we're
not too
about
bad.
the same size, but you're not used to having 2,000 people in that room.
Yeah, no, sir.
And that's really what it comes down to. There's plenty of people who played shows and are at shows where the stage and the crowd isn't as big. So it's like an ocean compared to years of swimming in a small pond. It's a harder thing to react to. And some people gravitate and start taking liberties and they look like jerk-offs. Other people are a little nervous, and I wouldn't be surprised because, you know, you might be up front and there might be 1,000 people behind you. That's a little bit extra chaos. And I think that a little bit more awareness of where you're at and a little bit more sympathy. If you're a bigger guy, you don't want to smash somebody, you know, I think, and also like, I know with the Sound and Fury, they had the 3-step thing. So everybody was punching people in the front and they looked so cool. I'm going to kick you in your fucking asshole or your chest if I see you on stage doing what you should be doing on the floor in front of the fucking band members. It looks stupid.
Yeah.
It looks stupid.
So,
you know, occasionally somebody can mosh up front and do something cool and dive off of. But the moshing in the front for nothing, unless you're an actual psychopath and you would do the same thing you're doing on the stage and the floor, just don't do it. You know, and also I don't mean the punching in the air. I mean the people like literally standing there punching the top of the stage. It's like, dude, stop. Stop. You know, I punched some kid in the mouth, not hard, just give him a little something at the Tsunami Church show. So it was like, come on, dude, what are you doing here? You know, the kid's just there standing there. You got some dude punching the head. He's trying to sing along. It's stupid to me.
Right. Yeah, he's trying to sing the sample. Let him sing the sample.
Dude, yes, I can't believe the kids sing the samples. It's so weird. But God bless them. It means they're fans. It means they like it. So more reason not to punch them in the fucking eye over nothing.
Right.
That shit that we did, it's also shit that we did. I say it when I say this. What we did brought the stock down in the hardcore thing.
Right.
We didn't do things, and because we were doing it, things rose. We didn't make it cool. We just did what we do because we were fucking crazier. And your generation is not crazier, so don't pretend to be crazy. Do what you do, but don't just go out there just to hurt people for a video. Because I'll tell you what, Sonny said to me, he's like, if I see dumb shit, I'm not even going to put it on the video. I'll pull it off.
Yeah, I'll just pan away. Sorry. Yeah, you just look like a fool. So to recap, jump high.
Yes.
Don't fuck with the band members.
Yes.
And
don't take liberties.
No targeting.
No, I mean, just don't take liberties. Like,
don't take liberties.
Don't, like if this guy came up to fight you, and you're like, look, you're too fucking small or I'll kill you. No reason to crush him in the pit. Let him go. Hit the bigger guys. I love when two big guys go at it. Cracks me up. It's like, oh shit, I see it coming. I see it from one side to the other. I'm like, oh shit. Let's see if this goes down. It's like, like the two goons on ice. Oh, are they gonna have it out tonight or what?
Yeah. So, Joe, that's a perfect segue into the very last question that I asked every guest who comes here on the podcast. We end every episode with a favorite mosh-related story that you would like to send us off on. So that's anything that's first your head, good, funny, gruesome, something that happened to you or just happened at a show you were at. Whatever's first your dome is how we start to end the show.
I mean, I should say it's bizarre that it's been 20 years since we were paid to mosh in an AFI video. Is that something that would? Yeah, we hit the 20-year mark since we all were flown out to mosh in a video for AFI. I don't know. I mean,
that's a pretty good gig. So
yeah, steel plate in my jaw from getting my jaw broke twice moshing. Broke my face, knocked out teeth. I mean, I love it. I love what it does for people. The kinetic release, the attachment to the scene, the excitement, the goofy, wild brotherhood that coming from being up in the front, going off, people jumping over your head. All this stuff really fucking is so enthralling and exciting to see people, try to outdo each other. The moments of when we were young and we would run into the dudes from New York and Connecticut and we would all try to mosh up front, go harder, do cooler moves. Yeah, all that shit's great. I was a huge part of my entire existence was the dance floor. And now a huge part of my entire existence is continuing the show so the dance floor stays what it was when we were around. A little dangerous, but no one taking liberties.
I love to hear it. This is Hardcore for the listeners is happening August 4th and 6th in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Joe, all the links for tickets, info for the lineup, your social links to the podcast, all of that will be in the show notes, the description. If there's anything you want to shout out, anything you want to plug, or anything you want to send the people off with, the floor is yours, my friend.
Hardcore is a very simple thing. You will get out of it what you put into it. If you are reacting and trying to be like other people, you are not having a genuine experience. Not everybody's going to have the exact same feelings about every single band, every single person, every single show. This is a community that has been going on much longer than most of you now listening have been alive. It is worldwide and it's growing every fucking second of the day. You have a great chance to be a part of it. And just being a part of a hardcore show, being at some place that is just off from the regular world, it's a very special experience. And there's still so few people, not that hardcore hasn't grown over 40 years, but it's a special community. And I think that when you sit there and read the internet, you're listening to people who have a very myopic, very small, jaded, or very young, unexperienced viewpoint. And they could steer you from something that's absolutely beautiful, where you end up with friends from all over the country, people that will always give a fuck about you, whether you see them one time a year or one time in a decade. And it's the biggest, hugest, most positive thing in my life. And it's why I continue to do it at the age that I'm at with my long beard. And everything you can ever ask for in life can come from it if you are there to accept what it gives you. And also, because you're a part of something, it's good to give back. Support everybody you can. Try to do at least the amount of harm possible. Don't get involved in nonsense gossip or listen to everything you hear as gospel. And when bad things happen to good people, try to support them. Go to the Year of Knife stuff on their social medias. They've got a GoFundMe. Put the good vibes, or pray if you believe in praying, that all of them come out with the same abilities they had when they went into the terrible accident, and support everything you can locally, regardless if you think it's the greatest thing or not. What you have locally will be completely impacted by your presence. So if you don't like something locally, you are able to change it just by your own presence. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for all the kind words and all the years of support. And you know how to reach me if you ever want to reach out to me. So thank you so much.
Beautifully said. Borderline scripture, I would say. Joe, I really appreciate you spending all the time that you did. I know we started a little bit later than we were, and
Hey, it worked
I know
out,
you're
man.
a very busy man, but this has been a chat that has, sparked a new fire in me, and I'm very just excited for everyone to check it out. And thank you again. I hope and know that This Is Hardcore will be as successful as it always is. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, man. Have a great day.